Yes, everybody, and welcome to High on Homegrown, the cannabis podcast from percysgrowroom.com. I am Mackie from the UK, and joining us this week, returning from her travels, we have Marge.
Hello, welcome back, everyone. I guess I'm saying welcome back.
Yeah.
Anyway, not very professional. I've taken too much time off, I guess, but I'm back. Marge, your host of Bite Me the Show about edibles. Oh my God, that was like not my best work. I'm so sorry, but
I'll fix it in post. Don't worry, Marge. Don't.
She's out of practice, man. That's it. She missed too many weeks.
She's been having those bubble hawk edibles. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You'll fuck around and find out.
Fuck around and find out edibles. Yeah.
That's right. We also have Monkey. What's up, Monkey? Tell us about your troubles this week.
You mean my 2 a.m. discovery yesterday that the AC in my grow room is going out? And it being a Sunday, you can't get parts today. So I am remote today. So if my audio sounds different, it's because I'm not in my regular spot, not on my regular computer, and not using my regular microphone. But I'm here.
That's right. That's the important thing.
Happy Sunday, everybody.
Nice. We also have Bubble Hawk. What's up, Bubble?
G'day, guys. Bubble Hawk coming at you from the land down under. Just a nice early morning start. I got my coffee. Good friends, good times. So
nice.
Other than that, nothing special. Just well, it is special being here for you guys. So
and then we also have a special guest this week. We did an interview on Thursday with Angus from the Real Seed Company, and because we're speaking about landraces, phenotypes, and hybrids in the Grow Guide section, we thought it would be cool to get Angus back for the live show, and he said yes. So here he is. Angus, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself to everybody?
All right, I guess I'll say hello. Hello, everyone. Yeah, also 110% unprofessional here as well. So, good to be
right
here, though. Yeah. Lovely jubbly.
Nice. There we go. That's it. Is that your intro? You didn't write anything down or anything? No.
Oh, I didn't even know I was meant to have one. That's what you're getting, I'm afraid. Sorry.
No, I'm just taking the piss, mate. It's all good. We just wing it every time, man. We just wing it. Yeah. So we had a great interview with you the other day, and thank you for being here to chat with us on the show. I had short notice as well. I only asked you yesterday, so thank you very much for jumping in.
Well, this morning really, because it was like I think midnight when you sent the email. Morning
maybe it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. My timing is off compared to most people in the UK. It's shocking. But it's gonna be one of those damn good shows, everybody. Damn good show. Yes. Yeah, Billy says Angus was still more professional than a Mackie intro. Thank you, Billy. Thank you.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, that's the last time I'm reading one of your comments. But yes, here we are, everybody. We're going to be discussing this week's cannabis news and events. As we do, we have 5 stories to be covering this week. And in the Grow Guide section, we're going to be talking about landraces, hybrids, and phenotypes as well. So we're going to be discussing cannabis genetics and things like that. And we mainly will be asking Angus questions, because this man knows his shit about all that kind of stuff. Definitely more than what we know. So it's going to be a real good episode of Grow Guides as well. So don't forget to hit that like button if you haven't done that already. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber, so you can take part in the chat and ask us questions later on. If you haven't subscribed yet, that would be cool. But yeah, that's about the intro. Nice and professional, that was, Billy. Did you see that? John? Did you see that, John? Nice. Yeah, so what we all smoking on this week? What you got, Bubble?
I got some purple kush, actually, this morning.
Nice.
And rosin, as all. I've always got dabs. Always dabs. But yeah, I've got purple kush in the joint, and I've got I think this is blackjack. It's either blackjack or Skittles, either of the two, in my dab rig. So if I disappear for 20 minutes, you know what's happened.
You're falling asleep,
I've fallen off the back of my chair a little bit too high.
Just laying there in a puddle of drool.
Yes, that's it. Trying to reaching up to hit the mute button.
What about you, Marge? What you got this week?
This week, I actually have a cannabis beverage, teapot, the mango green tea and Pedro Sweet sativa to try out.
Ooh.
Nice.
And a little bit of blueberry OG.
Yeah, you've been, because I sent a few of your Instagram reels this week where you've been talking about the cannabis drinks. You've been enjoying them this week, right?
Yeah, I have been actually. like them as an alternative to alcohol, especially.
Hmm.
I guess I need to infuse some sugar and get going with that then.
Yes, honey's good too for that. I like honey a lot. And a lot
Got
of
some
them-
agave nectar. I think that'll work pretty well.
Yeah, I imagine it would because it's pretty much the same consistency, right, as honey.
Pretty much
Mm.
about like, yeah, like a corn syrup or a honey. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah.
So how long does it take for it to kick in? Because, you know, when you have a beer or, you know, an alcoholic beverage, it kicks in pretty quickly. Is it the same effect with the edible drinks, you know? Edible
Yeah.
drinks, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I'd say especially the ones from like if you're buying them from the dispensaries or whatever, and they're like the nano emulsions that they're always talking about, those ones definitely hit faster.
No way.
Like 15, 20 minutes kind of thing, as opposed to 45 to an hour
Wow.
kind of thing.
I'd like that. That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
that's
you're
pretty
making
cool,
your
man.
own at home with your own infusion, like a honey or syrup or something, it might be a little bit longer, but I still feel like they still hit faster than an edible that you would eat.
Nice.
Yeah, and usually the high doesn't last as long either, which is nice if I don't know, you just don't want to be blasted for like 6 hours. I don't know.
I got it.
Yeah. Or you can always drink another one, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah. We're still not in the place where we can have these nice drinks here in the UK because, you know, it's a shithole. But anyway, Monkey, what are you saying? What you got?
I've got some LSD in the volcano tonight today. So I'm going back to an older crop, and I really like it. I have to just be careful with it. This is a really strong one, and it knocks the hell out of me if I'm not careful.
Nice. Well, I've just got some amnesia in the mighty as usual. But what's Angus got? Angus, are you partaking?
Oh God, yeah, no. Prepare to be disappointed. I might be about to get banned from the show, but I'm not
What?
actually smoking. I'm
What?
not smoking anything. I'm on
No.
a prolonged smoke break because I'm back in the UK, and the only person these days who I know who has anything I'd like to smoke is me, and
Mhm.
I don't have anything. I'm not much of a smoker of modern stuff. I mean, I am now and then, but generally the half of my year that I spend doing collecting and stuff is the half of my year when I'm smoking, if I'm smoking.
Nice.
And
Interesting.
yeah,
Smoking the real shit.
I like sort of the kind of things I'll be getting when I'm in, Nepal or Laos and that kind of place. Traditional ganja, traditional charas, and that sort of stuff. I mean, Bristol is not where I live. It's not exactly short of
Yeah.
opportunities, but the fellow who I would normally go and see, he has stuff like what did he have last time? Gorilla
Skittles.
Glue, and
Yeah.
he claimed that it was Gorilla Glue, and
Washing machine.
I don't know,
So
the sort of
funny.
stuff that for me it's I like it's just a bit much for me, honestly, some of it,
Mhm.
I like stuff that is gentle, powerful, but in a gentle way, if you know what I mean. Doesn't
Mhm.
rip your brain off and
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
and
I know what you're saying, man. I know, just a gentle
sounding old,
high
but
rather than
I'm
something that
getting old.
messes you up. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, man. But what's everybody out there in the chat smoking? Don't forget to let us know in the chat. Or if you're listening to this when the show is already over, then drop in the comments, man. Let us know what you're partaking in this week. It'd be good to know what is out there. We'll give a quick shout out to everybody who has joined us so far. We have Gellert, Twisted, Mad Dog, Savons, Billy, Improper Weed Viking. Good luck on your journey, bro. I hope you don't take too many of those edibles. We have Chilbert, Claude, and that's a new name. Welcome, Claude. Dr. Frankenstein, Time Warner, Pip Jam, Backblast, Snafu Bar, Lucent, Noel, Pagan, John F, Undertaker. Yes. Why did I write down yes? Did somebody come in called yes? Or was that just a Freudian slip of mine? Yeah, that's weird. Arnie Scarpa, Bob Carter, Unsure, Dougaloo, Hashimoto, Four Plants, Dr. Evil, The Bull Crux, SMG, Marvis Parvis, Bob West, South Silly. Who else do we have here? Yeah, don't forget to say hello in the chat if you haven't done that already, so we can give you a shout out. Well, I think that's everybody. I'm just going to scroll up now and see if there's anybody called yes. Or maybe somebody like joined the chat and said yes, and I've written that down instead of their name. Let's have a look. There, maybe John Finicky said yes there. I don't know.
That's possible, yeah.
Yeah, these things happen from time to time. What can you say? There it is. It was Bob Carter. Bob Carter said yes. So in fact, it's supposed to be Bob, not yes. Okay. There we go. Benny Ben's here, which means Firefly's also there. What's up, Firefly and Benny Ben? I hope you're all good, having a nice weekend. Professionalism in action. Thank you, Billy. You're gonna get muted, you are, bro.
Yeah.
Constant
He's pushing it
trolling.
today.
You know, gosh, but that's everything, man. We that's the shout out, and we've discussed what we're all smoking on this week. So I think it's time to move on to the cannabis news. Is everybody ready to talk about some news?
Hell
You
yeah.
can do that.
I think so.
Let's do
Yes.
this.
Marge
Enthusiasm
sounds
there,
really
man.
eager. Yeah, Marge
Yeah.
is definitely going first this week. Here we go.
Well,
for
you
the
know
news.
how long it's been since I've gone on.
Very true. Very true.
Oh,
Right,
you
so-
guys totally missed my setup.
What's that?
I said you missed it. You missed my setup. I was like, how long have I been on? 2 weeks, but
Oh, fuck it. Marge, you're just way too above us, man. You completely out of our level. Goddamn shit.
Okay,
Shit.
it's those
Sorry,
drinks
yeah,
he's making.
yeah.
That's what it is, man.
2 weeks. 2 weeks. There we go.
Weeks.
There we go. And Angus
there
is
you
now
go.
there like, what the fuck is this place?
Yeah.
That's a permanent thing for me, so you're all right. Just wherever I am, you know. I get that when
Yeah,
I'm in my
right.
living room just by myself.
It's just a Total Recall reference. You know Total Recall with Arnie back in the day?
Fucking hell, that's going back a bit. Yeah.
Yep. We all go back a bit, you know.
I don't remember what the reference is, but yeah.
The lady, it's Arnie. He's in the mask, and it's like,
Right.
how long do you plan on staying on Mars? And the lady's like, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and starts malfunctioning, and the face opens up.
2 weeks.
Anytime the term 2 weeks comes up, then we have to be like 2 weeks. Yeah, I don't even know why that like latched on the way it has, and but it's here now, and it's part of the
I don't
show, and it's
know.
here to stay.
It's high on homegrown, man. It's what it is, you know.
yeah.
Yes, good times, good times. Yeah, fucking everybody out there in the chat now saying 2 weeks. Good. Right, so let's talk about the cannabis news and events. Let's do it.
Yes.
So here we are, everybody. It's time to talk about some cannabis news and events. And every week when I go to Google and I'm trying to find news stories, I'll go to Google and I'll type in Cannabis News UK, and then I'll go to Tools, put in time limit last week. And all you can ever see is cops busted this guy, these plants were found, this grow house was bust. It's always the same shit, man. It's always the same shit. I was going to actually, instead of bringing a news article to the show this week, I was just going to go to the Google page and show you what the fuck it's like. And any cannabis news from the UK is just, these people got busted, this person got busted, the police have raided this place. It's absolutely fucking shocking, man. But I didn't do that. I did bring a story because one of the listeners sent in a story, but we'll get to that story later on because it's been a while and Marge has a new story to cover. So we should get Marge to do hers first. Don't you think, Marge?
That's right. I volunteer as tribute. I'll go first.
Nice. Nice.
I like it.
Yeah. So I wish I was bringing better news, but not today. MasterCard ban on cannabis debit card purchases rocks industry. And this was dated.
Damn. Sorry,
I know.
Marge.
That
It's
is a
big
pretty-
news.
that is a pretty
It's
big
big
deal,
fucking
yeah.
news. This is not even just for cannabis
Yeah.
users, for everybody. This is important news.
Right.
But
Yeah.
we'll go through the story first and then react to it afterwards. Eh?
So this was dated July 27th. So this is literally just happened. But MasterCard's new hardline demand that banks and payment processors immediately halt cannabis transactions involving its debit card has upended the marijuana industry and put more licensed operators at financial risk, industry insiders told MJ Biz Daily, which is where this article is from. The latest development, first reported by Bloomberg, is expected to affect adult use and medical marijuana retailers the most, as well as their customers, obviously. Those customers will likely revert back to the days of cash-only transactions, a throwback in an era when digital wallets are used to buy everything from groceries to gas. It's also a stark reminder that these types of businesses or business setbacks will persist without federal cannabis reform and as long as cannabis remains illegal under U.S. law, executives told MJ Biz Daily. So earlier this year, cannabis operators were forced to scramble and find a new payroll provider after receiving a memo from Paychex advising that the company would no longer process direct deposits or offer other financial services for marijuana-related businesses. MasterCard issued its cease and desist orders earlier this week to participating banks. In accordance with our policies, we instructed the financial institutions that offer payment services to cannabis merchants and connect them to MasterCard to terminate the activity, a spokesperson told the news agency. It's widely believed the vast majority of marijuana debit transactions at U.S. cannabis stores are routed either through First Federal Bank of Florida or Dart Bank in Michigan, which I'm not really. Do they use MasterCard a lot? I'm not really sure how that's connected, but executives from the two banks did not immediately respond to inquiries as a result of the marijuana card or MasterCard order. Cannabis businesses said consumers will likely see more ATMs at stores. Retailers in their supply chain will also have to deal with a lot more cash, which brings its own sets of challenges. I can't even talk today. Holy shit! Challenges and
Jesus.
It's been 2 weeks. Marijuana companies are particularly vulnerable to break-ins and robberies, given the highly cash nature of the business already. We're taking the situation, making it harder for cannabis businesses to facilitate legal operations, said Don Morris, co-founder of California-based Proteus 420, which makes point-of-sale POS and inventory software for cannabis companies. What this means is moving into heavier cash processing again, which increases theft and potential for more illicit market operators to move back into the space prior to legalization. They're talking about Dutchie next. Financial service providers in the cannabis space will have to find new solutions as well. So they mentioned Dutchie, which is like a tech platform that provides POS, hardware, and e-commerce solutions for retailers across the country.
I've heard of these guys. Is these the guys you have to pass on the left-hand side? Oi!
Well,
Dutchie is a pretty big company though, because they had those in Canada too. They were in a lot of retail stores. So I don't.
Gonna be one of those days, Marge.
I think so.
I'm still here giggling at myself over that shit.
So it's just going on. Like obviously Dutchie's now gonna have to change their whole thing because they're gonna have to remove MasterCard. But I find it interesting that they're talking about MasterCard debit transactions in particular, but they're not talking about credit.
But I think I mean it's
Is it all the same?
Well,
sort of, but not quite. Go ahead. You got it, Angus? Go ahead.
No. Carry on. Yeah.
Well, the article I read basically said what was happening is a lot in the States, especially a lot of dispensaries, because they cannot charge the actual charge to a MasterCard. Dispensaries were putting in ATMs where you would go into the ATM and take a cash advance out and then pay for your weed with the cash advance. And so what they're trying to do is get these ATMs that are either in dispensaries or like nearby or something like that, is what I read, is they're threatening to at least remove these ATMs from those locations. But
some of this said that some retailers will be bringing in ATMs as well, but maybe those are like those third-party ones where you pay like $5 to take money out or something.
That's kind of the things are. Yeah, that's what they are.
Yeah.
The reason it's as far as I know, because it's not like one of my favorite things to read about all this stuff to do with banks and stuff, but having the websites I've got, it's a permanent problem, trying to get card stuff you can use card on the site. And MasterCard, I mean, it's they own the networks, for being able to just do these transactions and stuff, so it's them and Visa and the other ones were American Express, and there's not many big, but you'll know the other big names, like Union Pay, I think, is the Chinese one, but that's got the whole of fucking China behind it, and it's barely, I don't think, made much of an impact in the West. You see it sometimes in some countries. I used to see it in like Serbia and stuff, which are part more of the kind of, they got a bit more in that sort of Russia, China type zone, and you see Union Pay in Thailand and stuff. But anyway, I mean, basically, if you're cut out of these things, you're screwed, really. I mean,
it makes it really difficult. And so Dutchie is coming up with a solution, they say, What are they saying here? Under their new service, Dutchy retail customers will essentially purchase Bitcoins from Dutchy Partner Mobile Currency LLC equal to the amount of the corresponding dispensary transaction. So it sounds like they're going to be incorporating some digital wallet to deposit, transact, and receive funds.
All this stuff is just a huge barrier,
service?
you know. Sorry.
Which sounds, I mean, that sounds like a workaround, I suppose, but at the same time, if you're not buying Bitcoin, and obviously Bitcoin prices fluctuate quite a bit, so I don't know how many.
Well, they did something similar to this with Bitcoin. When Bitcoin was reaching its all-time highs and shit, there was loads of credit card providers who were saying you can't use our cards to buy this kind of thing.
Yeah,
and it's bigger than just cannabis, man. This is essentially controlling what the consumers can do. It's a bad precedent for them to set, and you can kind of understand why, because right now cannabis is still illegal federally in the USA. So, you know, that's going to be one of their excuses. Like, they don't want too many cannabis transactions on their platform because it's illegal.
Right.
So
I think
that's to fall back on. Angus,
sorry. I think, it's the main excuse they gave is just the fact that it's illegal federally. But I think the reason why you have these banks, what was it, Florida First Bank, and then there was a bank in Michigan. I think they're fairly small, right? I mean, are they? Would that be right? They're not. They don't ring a bell for me anyway. I mean, not again an expert on American banks, but I think the reason so few of them are even prepared to provide these services is that and I know this from trying to get, like I say, card stuff and things for the website. The money laundering checks and that kind of stuff. Once you get into cannabis, basically, the reason the banks are very reticent to get involved is because of the illegality of the plant, or the marginality of it, or just the complexity of it. So what they're worried about is they're going to take on a client who's then going to start putting, laundering profits from illegal activities through. Now, I say like they're worried. I mean, obviously, the banking system is rife with money laundering,
but that's them at the top. That's not normal people. That's at the top. It's okay for them to do it. It's not okay for normal people to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's most of the services, the areas I've found that the countries that you tend to get. So for within the EU, like Lithuania and Malta and Cyprus and stuff, you tend to find that the companies that will provide these services in Europe tend to be associated with places like that. And they are countries that tend to provide those services to organized crime and stuff as well, So it's like, they just need to sort out the federal stuff in the States. It's amazing to me that they still haven't,
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the excuses they provide, it's like, what you're saying is obviously true. It's like, but on the other hand, I think the concern the bank's got is genuine in the sense that if they're already doing dodgy stuff, genuine in the sense that they genuinely, what I mean by genuine is they're genuinely worried about taking this stuff on because it puts them in the firing line and they're more likely just to be exposing themselves to interest that they don't want,
Yeah. But what gets me in this article as well, though, is the difference between debit cards and credit cards, where a credit card is essentially you're spending their money and paying them back later on. And a debit card is just a transaction where you're spending your money. And that's where my problem is with this shit. It's like, it's your money and you should be able to spend it on whatever the fuck you want to spend it on. And for them to step in and say you can't use our card to do this. But if you're on MasterCard, if you have a MasterCard that's a debit card, you need to fuck them off, man. Fuck you, cheeky bastards. Can't tell me how to spend my money.
Yeah, well, they will just come back and say like it's our networks and it's our process. Yeah. I'm not saying that. I'm just.
Oh yeah, of course.
That's their excuse, And,
but we need to show that the consumers are in charge, man, and but it needs to be a whole lot of people to stand up against something like this. And as you say, it's pretty much a monopoly where you have. I mean, it's not a monopoly because it's not just MasterCard. You have Visa and other big banks, but there's only a few of them. There's a handful of them that control the whole system.
I mean, HSBC, there's that famous case in Mexico where the cartels would just walk into the bank with suitcases of cash, And the story goes that literally they used to widen the gaps. Like they had to sort of end up widening the gaps on their sort of screens. With I don't know if it's true, but so it was easier for them to push their suitcases full of literal like cash through. It's just outrageous. And the City of London, like the money pouring through the British financial system that comes from organized crime, and also like fucking Delaware, Biden's home state, it's like offshore central, so when you hear like LLC and stuff on that Bitcoin thing, these limited liability companies that you can set up, they give you an astonishing amount of that. You can if you pay a good enough lawyer, you can create these structures where it's more or less impossible for anyone to ever know where the money your money is coming from, but to actually get the point of service kind of for someone to come and actually pay you with a card and stuff, you've still got to find someone who's prepared to provide that for you. None of the big British banks these days will do it. I've for many years had one of these, one of these terminals, as it were, on the site where you could use a card from a company called Secure Trading that were based in Malta. They were dodgy as fuck, and they eventually got shut down, and because they were involved in such a lot of fraud and this kind of stuff, so they got bought by one of the more superficially respectable banks, eventually. And when they were going back through and checking what the fuck was on their system, because they don't know, like once they get big enough, no one fucking knows what's going on. Nobody knows even how the banks themselves work. But Secure Trading didn't know who was on their books. When they got taken over, the new company didn't know who they had on their books. It took them 3 or 4 years to find me on their system. The money just comes in. It's just like an automatic machine. And they would have had all kinds of stuff on there, I suspect. like companies doing selling dodgy pharmaceuticals and stuff. And God knows what else. And they just don't know. They're so massive.
The thing that I find interesting though is like, yes, they do need federal legalization would make a huge difference in all of this, but MasterCard sounds like been working with these businesses for quite a while now. Why they're pulling out at this point, it's hard to say, but they're also working with legal cannabis businesses who have gotten licensing and jumped through hoops and paid obscene amounts of money to open these stores and run these businesses. And I don't know, to me, the odds that they're using it as a front for money laundering or anything else shady business they think could affect MasterCard seems unlikely.
Cash is king, man. Cash is king, and this is why they want to take cash away from us all and turn us into a cashless society. But damn, man, cash is king. Just pay with cash, motherfuckers. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, I agree with this story. It's hard to say, like specific. Yeah, like because what I was saying with the money laundering, it's difficult to say because it doesn't seem like it would be the case. Like saying with clients of theirs who've got 100% legal operations going on in whichever state, but I guess they're not 100% legal in the sense they do conflict with federal law. But it's not obvious why MasterCard would suddenly care about it. It's a little strange.
Interesting story, man, and there's going to be repercussions from it, which maybe this will set a precedent. We'll see how things develop. But in my personal opinion, I've been to shops before where they're like, oh, we don't take cash, and it's like, okay, then I won't be using your services anymore, because we should always have the option of being able to pay cash, and if you don't have that option, you can go fuck yourself. I don't want to have business with you. That's
legal tender.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. They can't really refuse. I guess can they refuse you cash?
You can as a business, you can refuse anyone you feel like if you don't want to sell something to them. But it's once we're all off cash, it's going to be much more like a panopticon where they can see exactly what's going on. But then all these things like Bitcoin as well, I find them strange because supposedly you're stuck on this massive ledger once you've done a transaction. There's a sort of permanent record of everything that's been bought and sold. So it seems odd to me that people use it for doing.
It's like it's anonymous, but they can relate the wallet address back to you, so it's not really anonymous, is it? It's a dodgy one, man. Cash is king. Still waiting to see anything that's better than cash. It's easier to pay with card for many reasons, but you should always have the option of being able to pay cash. That is what's always
gold is the other alternative. If you're Mr. Putin's literally flying planes of gold around at the minute.
Of course, yes.
He might be the richest man in the world, and we just don't know it.
Yeah.
Putin is very rich, man. Very rich, very, very powerful.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, all his money went, I mean, the reason he exists is the UK financial service system and Switzerland and New York and whatever. It's all right for him to like fleece, literally just take billions out of the country, as it is for all the other dodgy autocrats that we've helped to loot Africa and wherever else, Excuse me. But anyway, yeah, I mean,
Why do we always get the
it's a
blame?
bit hypocritical.
It's goddamn UK. Goddamn.
Well, yeah, we are pretty bad on that one.
Yeah, we are fucking bad,
Mildly.
man.
It's the Second Empire.
Mm-hmm. The world's a crazy place right now, man. This is an interesting story for sure, and I think it just infringes on consumer rights too much. When, like I said, it's debit card, man. You're using that card as the middleman to push your money around from one place to another. You're not using MasterCard's money. Like, if you go and buy your petrol and you pay it on your credit card and you pay it off at the end of the week, that's using MasterCard's money and paying them back. That's different in a way. But debit card, that's my fucking money. And you're forcing me to use it in this way. God damn. Crazy shit, man. Crazy shit. But we'll see what happens, isn't it? What other news stories do we have here? We have some. Do you want to cover one, Angus? You got your news story? You got interesting
Oh
stuff?
God, right, yeah.
Yeah, there's still more news stories to cover.
Yeah.
We've only covered one.
Yeah. And we was reasonably calm. We didn't freak out or anything. We did really well with that one.
I almost
Thanks,
did.
Marge.
I almost went off on one about Vladimir.
No
Putin,
rant though.
which is always
No
bad
rant.
stuff.
No, don't worry. There's still plenty of time for us to rant. Let's do it.
Yeah. So this is about Nepal, which is one of various countries that are, going down this medical marijuana quotes route with Laos and Ukraine, and I think is it Czech Republic or somewhere. But anyway, so this is it's fairly recent. It was back in June though. So it says highly anticipated quotes. Activists stoked as government announces feasibility study feasibility study plan for medical marijuana. And do you want to read the whole thing? I don't know if I can fucking manage that, but the point is the finance minister Prakash Sharan has announced a fiscal plan and a big feasibility study for marijuana farming for the next fiscal year. And when he announced it, there was some sort of bit of banter and laughter going on in the parliament because he kept on chuckling, and people were sort of speculating that he might actually be stoned himself. And it's a very big moment for Nepal because it has a long history of trading in cannabis. It became illegal only back in 1973 during the Nixon administration, when him and Spiro Agnew, I think it is, just lent on the Nepalese to ban it, and this was kind of part of bringing them out. This was Cold War stuff, really, bringing them out of the orbit of the Soviet Union and China more into the American side. And so, in return for this, a lot of aid money and stuff, it was agreed that they would ban cannabis. It had been getting a lot of headlines, what with the hippie trail and stuff, going to Kathmandu and things. So it says the finance minister's announcement didn't come out of the blue. It followed years of sustained movement. In last year's general elections, at least one candidate contested the polls on the pro-legalization plank. So it's a strange idiom there, but anyway, although the candidate from the right-wing Rastriya Prajatantra Party fought the poll with a winningly thought-out slogan, Jaya Desh, Jaya Charas, which means glory to the country, glory to Charas. He didn't actually succeed. Anyway, so the idea is that any farmer with a desire to cultivate marijuana can get a license from the local government or the respective district administration after specifying the area of cultivation, the people involved, and providing an assurance against unauthorized use. It proposed the formation of a 14-member marijuana board led by the health secretary to regulate and manage the cultivation and sale of marijuana. Anyway,
Yeah, you don't need to read it all. You know.
Yeah,
You
it's a
just
lot
sum
of
it up.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a long one, but it's
and
interesting. So essentially,
yeah,
the farmers are going to be able to grow cannabis legally in Nepal now if they get a
yeah,
license.
only for the medicinal, only for medicinal purposes at the minute.
Right.
And I mean, as it is, it's like it's really not. I'd say from my own experience, it's not. You know, the laws aren't strongly enforced there. You know, so within Kathmandu Valley, all around the capital, you don't have to go more than about you know, half an hour's drive out of the city to find farms where it's being grown. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm kind of I don't know, with a state like Nepal, like the power of the state itself to actually enforce these things is so limited anyway. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they have sort of and what happened after 1973 when they banned it was that a lot of the main areas that did use to supply cannabis in the sort of hippie era, you know, when Kathmandu was like one for quite a while, the sort of the place that people went to after they'd gone through Afghanistan and into India and stuff, and they'd often end in Kathmandu or you know, Goa was the other one in around there. But what happened was that the communities that were very dependent on the trade did get hit pretty hard, you know, once prohibition got brought in, because they couldn't cultivate and sell in the way that they used to. And these same areas were the got increasingly poor, and then effectively fell into the sort of the lap of the Maoist revolutionary movements in Nepal.
Right.
So in the 90s, I'm not saying like Maoists as in like actually, you know, working with Chairman Mao, but like, you know, that was the Marxist Leninist revolutionary philosophy that they subscribed to. And during that, a civil war started, and it really, the hotbed of it, where it literally did start, was in Rukum and Rolpa and places. So that then led to a civil war that finally led to the you know, royal family being kicked out, and you know, quite far left governments subsequently. And you know, so it's just one example of what a fucking stupid thing it is to do to ban cannabis. You know, yeah. The day that it was announced that they were banning it in 1973, there was this mysterious fire that took hold in the royal palace, you know, burned down half the palace. And hippies were looking and going, you see, you've pissed off Lord Shiva, you know. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a bunch of farmers.
It's like what happened in the Netherlands recently, isn't it? The farmers got pissed off and just started setting fire to things. Yeah, it's crazy, man. But it's good to see them taking a step in the right direction by at least allowing them to grow it now. And
yeah,
it
it never
as if the
fills
world's
me
steadily
with
moving there.
Sorry, what was that?
It just seems as if the world's steadily moving in the right direction, just slowly.
Yeah, slowly. Yeah, it doesn't fill me with joy though. Like you were telling me to find stories to talk about, and like I said, I sort of just stopped paying much attention to it because it seems it does matter, because it matters to me personally on a sort of emotional level, insofar as I hate seeing people getting fucked over by this stuff, getting busted and arrested, having their lives
and that's
fucked.
all we see in the UK here. As I said at the start of the news, it's like when I search for cannabis news every week, all I'm seeing is drug bust everywhere.
Yeah.
That's all we're seeing in the. That's all the news we see. We see something
in terms of
slid in there, but
in terms of the consequences of the of this law change, it doesn't sort of seem to me like it's going to have any radically beneficial effect for farmers at the minute, because I mean you know, they're just introducing these very clunky systems, and at best they'll find a way to keep you know, big corporate sort of big marijuana quotes out. You know, hopefully they will succeed in doing the law in that way. But other than that, it's sort of you know, like I say, you go to any district in Nepal, and it's already being cultivated. At the minute, you know, the people who really benefit most financially are the people who control the transportation networks, and the smuggling networks, so the taxi companies and the bus companies and that kind of stuff, they make the big money. The farmers don't make much, but it doesn't look obvious to me that there's going to be sort of anything massively beneficial for them. And likely when the corporatization of it happens, they'll be using introduced seeds from other places. So on an ecological level, it's going to be quite bad news unless all the land races and wild stuff is being collected. Anyway, that's enough from me.
Yeah, I'll just give everybody a quick look here because I've just done a quick Google search, Cannabis News UK, and I've made it for the last week. And we can have a look on the screen right here what kind of articles we're looking at when we see this kind of shit. We have 3 charged after cannabis worth £1 million discovered. Crackdown on cannabis grows continue as 300 plants seized. Cannabis grows spanning 2 properties found. Drugs seized as cannabis cultivation in Canterbury. Cannabis farm out of harvest in Tameside. Rugby man jailed after flat search reveals tents full of. I wonder what that next word is going to be. And then up community warrant executed at Canvey Island. Police uncover cannabis plants after raid in Canvey, and it goes on and on like that for pages and pages, man. This is the news that we have here in the UK. So it's shit that we have to look at this kind of stuff, man. But that's just the way it is. I didn't find a news article, but I do have one from a listener who sent one in, which it's kind of okay. It's kind of good news for here in the UK. I'll quickly cover it now. We have landmark ruling gives hope for UK CBD flower businesses, and again, it's just CBD flower. We want THC flower as well. We want just cannabis. Can you stop fucking around, please, and just fucking legalize already? Shit. This article goes on. I'll put it on the screen so you can see it. A landmark Court of Appeal ruling in the UK has set new legal precedent for businesses in the UK importing and selling CBD or low THC hemp flower. Crucially, the Court of Appeal has made it clear that it does not consider hemp flower with a THC content below 0.2% as a narcotic drug. Despite this, due to the timing and complexity of the case, this is far from the definitive free pass to import and sell low THC flower that has recently been seen in France. As Robert J.P., life sciences partner at Field Fisher, explained to Business of Cannabis, it doesn't give the green light for those businesses to carry on and openly trade, but at the same time, I think it substantially reduces the risk of criminal prosecution. Behind the complex legal implications of the ruling lie years of financial and mental anguish, persecution, and hard work by the business owners who enable it. A story business of cannabis will be exploring in greater detail in the coming weeks. So it looks as if we've been able to get CBD flower here in the UK for quite a while. You can go to places like Holland and Barrett, and I think maybe even Boots, and they do some CBD kind of stuff, but it's not regulated very well. It's low quality as far as I've heard. I don't know. You can even we have this shop called Poundland here in the UK. Pound Town is what Marge referred to it the one time, remember? And they had Epsom salts with CBD added to it, so you can have Epsom salts with CBD added in the bath. So it's making its way into some kind of medicinal purposes here in the UK, but it's just not good enough. It's not good enough, man. What do you think? What do you think about this, Angus? Because you're in the UK as well. What do you think about this kind of stuff?
I mean, as I was kind of rambling on about when I was on last time, we only ended up banning it here kind of by accident. I mean, it sounds stupid, but it was banned back in 1928. I think when we signed up to the League of Nations narcotics conventions, which were really about banning opiates. And the British had fought very hard to keep it off the law books because of the fact that at that time Britain was ruling, occupying, colonizing, however you want to put it, India particularly, which then included Pakistan and Bangladesh and places. It was the biggest market for cannabis in the world, and the British had fought very hard to stop it being banned. And when it came into force in the UK, basically nobody knew really much about it. It had sort of briefly had a period as a medicine in the Victorian era, but the problem was that standardizing the potency of it proved really difficult because people who were buying the material in India frequently bought poor quality stuff. I think the Indians regarded them as easy marks, and there's not knowing much about it. Early busts you see were in the ports in London and Liverpool and Hull and places like that, and Belfast, where you had sailors coming in from places like Egypt and India who were just using hashish and stuff, And there was one bust involving a Jamaican. This is we're talking in the mid-30s, And generally what happened wasn't that the police were out looking for cannabis. They were called in because the Lascars, which is what these guys mostly were, which was a name for kind of block hired crew from east of the Cape, mostly were Muslims and didn't like to drink alcohol, and generally, so cannabis was their drug of choice. And what normally would have happened was that they'd have got into a fight with someone, so they've got into a fight with a sort of a white officer, or something along those lines, and then the cops would get called in, and it would quickly, people twig to the fact that they'd search their rooms and stuff and find this stuff and go, oh, this is cannabis, So anyway, I'm just giving the kind of background to it. So, but then we've ended up in this situation where, I mean, bear in mind, like in the 60s and stuff, England had a fairly kind of liberal policy towards a lot of drugs, like you could get heroin prescriptions, still, even in kind of 1968, like kind of crazy writers like William Burroughs moved to London to get onto these quite liberal, to take advantage of these things, to get off things like heroin and stuff, So, but I think then you had a period when things got more controversial, and you had a big flood of heroin coming in the 70s, for example, and the whole thing of drugs and the counterculture and cannabis and stuff became a bit more inflammatory, and now you've got to a point where, it's a heavily systemically racist system where you're like 7 times more likely to get busted if you're black and stuff, or 16 times in some bits of the UK, And the Blair government, they did try to legalize it, decriminalize it. There was a brief period. I mean, Blunkett actually was about to decriminalize it, who was the Home Secretary. So, he, they
he brought it down to Class C, didn't he? And there was an uproar about it.
Yeah, and effectively what happened was that the police then lent on him, and it was them that sort of bullied him back into changing the law back, in conjunction with the right-wing tabloids press, and which the Labour just are scared of, because they know that if they haven't got them on side, they don't stand a fucking chance, So, it went back to being properly, a criminal offence, and I don't know. I mean, I think it's a generational thing, really.
Yeah.
It's going to be really difficult to do anything about it for Starmer.
I think as we see it more in shops, though, the way that things are, being able to get the Epsom salts with cannabis on it, you're seeing the cannabis leaf on more products and in more stores in different varieties as well. Different kinds of medicines, for lack of a better term, and people are seeing it more often, and they're becoming more acclimatized to it being around. And I think it's just reducing stigma slowly but surely.
The thing I would say, just a last point, because I tend to go off on one, so just like Tom to shut up. But the last thing I'd say is that the elite, the establishment in the UK, in terms of the sorts of people who you'd see in the House of Commons, in Parliament, even the Conservative Party. If you ask most Tories, even fucking 20 years ago, most Tories, sort of Conservatives, they would all say, oh yeah, it should be legalized. Yeah. But it's especially, actually, I'd say Tories, because they tend to be more kind of like, I mean, old school Tories, even though they're very right wing, they tend to be quite liberal on matters of personal choice, many of them. But in practice, when they get into government, as with Labour, they always play on the, we're tough on crime, we're tough on, which it can be a dog whistle for all kinds of things. It can mean we're tough on blacks, we're tough on the young black guys, basically. What it can mean to a lot of their target audience when they're saying that, we're not soft on the people who might nick you or scare you when you're walking down the street if you're a pensioner, basically. It's all got mixed up with all kinds of racialized issues, even though actually in practice white people use cannabis a lot more than any other group, so
It's
anyway.
interesting, man, to see how things are evolving here in the UK. But I think we have just bigger problems right now. I don't think they're focusing on the legalization of cannabis because they just don't see how many problems will be solved when they properly legalize and regulate cannabis.
I think they
How
probably
many jobs
do,
will be
but
created.
they don't want to. The main people who don't want to do it is the police, because it gives them the ability to stop and search people. You know,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
they need an excuse for stopping and searching people in the
Yeah.
street.
I
And,
smell cannabis. This
yeah,
car reeks of the ganj.
yeah, yeah,
No.
and
Remember
then they
that
don't.
story? Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Shit.
But yeah, I'm just repeating stuff I said before, but all just to say they don't want to take on this issue. Everyone, all their advisors will say, don't bother with it. It's just too much hassle. We've got other things we should be doing, and it just gets passed on to the next
Mm-hmm.
administration. You know.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Just there's a line here: the UK police forces all cannabis sativa flower, regardless of THC content, as a controlled substance, an element of the Misuse of Drug Act, which is long hindered the CBD and hemp industries. But you can buy it. Remember, like I said on most of the shows that we've done over the last 6 months, man. If you pay the bribe to the government's friend, then you can have a prescription, and you can go and buy and possess cannabis legally. But you have
You
to
know,
pay the fine, the bribe.
If you pay a big enough bribe, you can grow it yourself.
That's
too, can't
right.
you, Mackie?
That's right. That's right.
well, you know why the whole medicinal marijuana thing became such a big issue.
Because of Hannah Deacon, that
So
seems to be a
the
big push.
the MS, you're talking about the MS, multiple sclerosis stuff. I don't know who
Right. Okay.
is that. Who's Hannah? Sorry, who's Hannah Deacon?
Hannah Deacon was what's it? Alfie Dingley is her son with a form of epilepsy.
Oh, the more recent.
Yeah,
That's
there's
sort
been
of
a few cases.
in the was that more sort of back in Theresa May, David Cameron type time?
2018. Yeah. Theresa May time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So going back before that, even into the 90s. So the Tories got interested in the medicinal thing as a way of actually heading off legalization in the UK.
Right.
So they thought if we turn the whole discussion that towards this, we can essentially sort of just shut down the broader discussion about the sort of personal right to get high. You know, the whole question of whose business is it that I'm smoking cannabis. You know, we can just shut down that whole aspect of the discussion and just say, well, the science isn't clear yet, and you know, and basically science is a very powerful way of like that authority is a very powerful way of like shutting down the discussion. You know, like scientific authority. You know, so anyway, they sent they'd heard about the guy David Watson, who claims to have bred skunk, and being based in Holland in Hortefarm. So the Home Office actually sent people out to meet him and Rob Clark, if you know who I mean, who wrote all the books about hashish and stuff. Yeah, so they had this company called Hortefarm, and the Home Office, it was actually the Home Office, you know, who's I don't know what the equivalent name is in the States. Anyway, you know, they deal with all the actual stuff to do within the UK, and they sent people out to meet Rob Clark and David Watson, as in Skunkman Sam, and yeah, and then Hortefarm started working with this guy Jeffrey Clark, who'd made an absolute fortune out of slow release opiate pills. Yeah, and they established this company GW Pharmaceuticals, which is based in Porton Down, which is the old weapons testing place in the southwest of the UK. So Jeffrey Guy, yeah, who'd made a killing out of you know, those pills that said do not chew. You know, only chew this if you want to get fucking loaded. You know.
Yeah.
Right.
Damn,
So anyway, that slow release technology for stuff like OxyContin and stuff, he'd made it. He had a patent on that, and so yeah, it was, you know, absolutely an inside establishment thing. But the reason they knew about David Watson, Sam Skunkman, and Rob Clark, I mean, it's strongly debated about how it was they were, even known so well by the Home Office, but there's all kinds of rumors to do with providing information because possibly it is claimed by some people David Watson had got busted back in the States, and so the DEA already had him, by the balls, as it were, and stuff. And but it's very shady, and there are sort of conspiracies, and the whole thing was a ploy, because they've been very, very, very sort of heavily lobbied by multiple sclerosis people to change the law to enable medicinal use. But they saw it as a great way of kind of not legalizing properly.
Yes, man, conspiracy. I do like conspiracy.
Yeah, it's a real one. It's true.
Yeah, that's it. There's definitely some dodgy shit going on in the background that keeps cannabis illegal for as long as it has been. Because it just seems common sense to most of us that it should be legalized and properly regulated. It's the only way to move forward with it.
I think I don't want to repeat stuff I said before. I mean, tell me if I am. I've had like about 3 or 4 ciders now, so. But corporate involvement in cannabis in the UK is it goes back a long, long way. I mean, so the East India Company that colonized India long before any kind of direct government involvement from London, was a corporation. It was one of the first multinational corporations. It came about because in Amsterdam and in London, people had this idea of the joint stock, shares, basically. So companies in that sense. This whole idea that we can pull together our resources and have shares in this corporation. So it's one of the first multinational corporation. They very quickly found out about cannabis, and so you had people like Robert Hooke and Robert Knox and Thomas Bowery and stuff, who were all these merchant adventurers, you could say, who were discussing turning England into a centre for, medicinal marijuana would be the current, well, not so current, but terminology. But back then, they knew it as ganja and cannabis and stuff. And there's a whole lecture by Robert Knox to the Royal Society. So, talking real core establishment, in London, saying, we have to, this is an amazing new herb. He had migraines, really bad migraines. Robert Hooke, this is a guy who invented like the wave theory of light, microscopy, cell biology, the theory of the cell, all kinds of stuff. This guy was a genius, and he thought cannabis was amazing, and was encouraging the UK to get into this, and they did, but mostly within India and mostly through tax farming, the trade, but you can find detailed discussions of like the whole economy of cannabis in India, how to cultivate high quality sinsemilla, all of that. It's all, they documented this at length, like volumes and volumes of it in the Indian Hemp Drugs Commission and stuff, So I don't think there's any intrinsic capitalists love cannabis, it's more about how democracy gets twisted in knots sometimes, and you just have certain certain constituencies within the UK, certain demographics that don't know enough about it yet, and just are scared of it still, and it's just a discussion that they want to put off as much as they possibly can, they being the parties that are actually in power, Yeah.
Man, we could talk for hours about this shit because it's a deep history into all of it, and shitloads about cannabis history, man. It's very cool, and we want to get you back on as well for a Q&A, everybody. That's right. We want to get Angus back on in the future for a Q&A so we can ask him loads of questions about stuff. So be ready for that. And he's going to drink load of ciders then too.
Yeah. It's been a long weekend. It's my brother's birthday,
Sweet.
So yeah, it's been a bit of a heavy weekend. It was anyway. It's been since about Tuesday, last week.
Tuesday is definitely not the weekend, bro.
Yeah, but it is in some ways.
Yep, I suppose it is. Yeah.
Seen through the bottom of a pint.
If Monday is the week, then Tuesday is definitely the weekend. drag it
I
out.
don't know.
It's
It's
a
quite
party.
close to Sunday, though, if you think about
It
it.
is, for sure. For sure. It's only a few days away. Might as well be, right?
Yeah, right. You
But
get science, that is.
we got Monkey has some interesting news out of the USA here, which is it just goes to show the stupidness in between the states legalizing and the problems with the federal legalization. You got this, Monkey?
Yeah. It's stories basically 19 places in the United States where you can still go to jail for simple possession. And I know that a lot of people, we have an international audience, and a lot of people have been under the impression for a while that pretty much the states is the Wild West and you're not going to get into trouble. I know we've talked about this many times. It varies so much difference across the states. This is kind of like the present state of affairs. Here we are. So this article was written, it's dated 2022, but let's just take a look at it. It's 2022, more than 2 decades into the 21st century, and in way past time to stop jailing people for weed. But as shocking as it is, there are still 19 states where simple possession can land you in a cage. The Marijuana Policy Project released a new report to highlight the risk of jail in states which have the worst pot laws. In some of these states, penalties are shockingly harsh. In Alabama, for example, a first offense of any amount for personal use carries a maximum penalty of 1 year in jail. Repeat offenses carry a mandatory of 1 year and 1 day in jail.
Wow.
So I mean, yeah, get caught with a roach and you can be sent to jail for 1 year in Alabama. How's that?
Jesus.
Yeah, it's not all fun and games in the states, but it's not terrible. Let's just keep on going here. Even worse, the police and courts do not enforce the pot laws equitably. In every state nationwide, police are more likely to arrest Black people than their white counterparts for cannabis possession. This is despite similar use rates. For example, in Kentucky, Black people are 9.4 times more likely to be arrested for cannabis than white people. That's crazy. 9.4 times. That just, just right there. That makes me want to change the law instantly right there. Yeah. Cannabis prohibition has flat out failed. The group consistently calls for cannabis legalization coast to coast. It recognizes that most likely route is a laudable goal through state governments. Okay, let's take a look at it. In Alabama, like we said, any amount, you can go to jail for 1 year, and it's a misdemeanor, and it can carry 1 year and $6,000 fine. Repeat offenses will carry a mandatory year and $6,000 fine in Alabama, and that's crazy. Arkansas has some of the worst pot laws in the nation. Possessing less than 4 ounces is a misdemeanor, carrying up to 1 year in jail and a fine of $2,500 for less than 4 ounces. Crazy. Florida, everybody would think Florida, okay, they're a little bit progressive. Not really. Florida is the 3rd most populous state. It has medical cannabis. Nevertheless, 21.5 million residents live under the threat of criminal convictions and jail time if they have weed without a medical card. Currently, possession of up to 20 grams or less of cannabis gets 1 year in prison and a fine of $1,000. So it's really not that bad, huh?
Look at that horrific typo there. Currently, possession of 20 grams or less in cannabis gets no year. What?
That's not bad.
That's
somebody
Florida
been
spelling,
smoking
guys.
while they're reading this, writing
Florida
this.
spelling, guys. Yeah, that's how they do it down there.
You can ask ChatGPT to fix this stuff now. Jesus. Sorry,
do you know, like these because often these what the law actually says in terms of what the sentences are. Do you know, like, are they usually is that actually enforced, or do the judges tend to not actually hand down?
Where you hit the nail on the head. These laws are not consistently enforced. Yeah. They basically can decide to pick and choose, and that's why 9.4 times as many people that are Black people are getting charged than whites, because they're choosing who to prosecute based upon it could be anything about the way they look, the way they're dressed, the way they speak, the way the officer feels that day. There's no guideline there. So basically what you're doing is the same thing that you were talking about that the UK does. You're giving the police officers a weapon to use as they see fit.
Yeah,
it's not consistent.
They literally came to the equivalent of our Secretary of State, I guess it would be. I don't know, the Home Office Minister Blunkett at the time of our sort of more left-leaning Labour Party, that it was the cops who came to him and sort of strong-armed him into recriminalizing possession, you know. So because they said this is just a horrific interference in our ability to operate, you know, like they love to have that freedom to, you know, and that like that 9.4 figure, yeah, it can get even worse in some bits of the UK. I think like some of the Southwest, it's like 16 times more likely if you're black to be busted by the cops. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I wish there was a way we could fix that. I mean, I just don't know any way possible to get the officers to be fair across the board. I mean, what they would say is, well, do you want to go to jail more often then? Like, no, I just want everybody to be treated equally and fairly. That's all, you know, that's crazy.
One thing is that I think a lot of those things, I mean, obviously the only real way to solve it is to just change the fucking laws. But cops themselves, like, you know, it's not a particularly well-paid job, I don't think, in the States, is it? It certainly isn't in England. Some of the officers, and
no, it's not.
They don't. I mean, I'm not saying this at all to defend the police, but you know, they don't. I think a lot of the reason that they can be so brutal is not simply that they're all necessarily a bunch of fascists. I mean, in England, you know, it used to be that you couldn't get into the cops if you weren't a Tory, for example, but so you know there's a strong right-wing leaning historically within the UK police force, but right-wing as in conservative, you know, not libertarian or anything. But I think the fact that police don't feel respected often, that they feel they've got low status in the community, makes them more likely to be brutal, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the States, it's pretty irregular, but the laws do need to be made more consistent. For easy example here is we've talked about Oklahoma many times on this show. Oklahoma is kind of like the Wild West of medical marijuana in the states, but the laws are the most lenient, easiest to get your medical card. For the longest time, it was easiest to get your licenses to actually grow or sell or process or anything like that. It was an easy market and it was a saturated market. But in Oklahoma, now remember, it's only a medical situation. You can still go to jail in Oklahoma if you have recreational cannabis and no medical card.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's fucked.
That is kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they also say in a situation in Oklahoma that black people are arrested 4.2 times more than white people are in Oklahoma for that stupid reason. Now, that's not saying that you will be arrested. Again, just like we talked about here, it's up to the officer's discretion whether or not he wants to pursue this or not. And I can tell you, in a lot of cases, I'm not going to say brushed under the rug, but you're given a warning. You know, you'll probably take the cannabis off of you. You're given a warning and sent on your way. It's kind of, they make a note about it, so if you're caught again, that they may not let you go, kind of thing like that. But it's completely up to the officer's discretion whether or not he wants to do that.
So there's 19 states here where you can still go to jail for possession of cannabis. Does that mean the other states you can't?
Well, you could, I guess, if you like, let's say, you probably could go to jail in California for possession of massive amounts of cannabis, because then it would be rolled into something about trafficking illegal or something like that. You see what I'm saying? But no, this is for like this is simple possession, for like just having an amount that a normal smoker might have in their pocket, kind of thing like that. You got Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and West Virginia. You could all go to jail there for simple possession of cannabis, not with intent, none of that kind of stuff. Just a simple possession of a small amount of cannabis can send you to the jail if they decide to do that. So yeah, the U.S. is no utopia here. You know,
land of the free.
Long way to go. Oh yeah, free as
unless
long as
you've got weed.
Unless you got weed in 19 different states here. You know how I'm saying? So anyway, we're going long, so I'm not going to go on every specific state there, but that's basically it. We have a lot of racial disparities in this country, and have a lot of crazy laws in almost half of the states still. So we have a long way to go.
Yeah, I think I mean, a lot of people don't have respect for the police nowadays, and you can see why. And I often like to think how different the respect for the police would be if we didn't have this bullshit war on drugs for the last 50 years, where they're essentially persecuting and prosecuting people for things that are none of their business. You know, if you are doing something that has zero detrimental effect on anybody, then you should be allowed to do it. And the fact that the police have been bothering people for choosing to expend their consciousness in whichever way they fucking want to. The fact that the police have been on your case about it for so long, people just fucking hate them now because they can see
Well,
that they're prosecuting people for things that are not crimes.
especially if if they're using the cannabis in the privacy of their own home, not bothering anyone, not harming anybody. It's a victimless crime. You know,
Yeah,
it's one of those stupid things. So what are they doing that's wrong here? They go
that's
in,
right.
they have their experience, they sober up, they come out, nobody's harmed.
Some of
Do,
those
do,
that worry
do,
forces are the same that burn crosses. Just saying.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
do you
Sorry,
I
remember
hear you.
the London riots? There were some
Yes,
really big riots in London. When would it have been? Kind of
about 2013. Soon like that.
2013, yeah. So, I mean, when they spoke to people who'd actually taken part in the riots, afterwards, they being like researchers from universities and stuff, you know, social sciences people, one of the main, in fact, I think it was the highest, you know, given answer was that stop and search, which was, you know, which is,
Yeah.
they have a similar thing in New York and stuff, as far as I know, very similar policies, you know, which is often like, it's often drugs are the reason, cannabis is the reason given by the cops for stopping people. And yeah, rioters all were saying, you know, yes, we've just had enough of being stopped all the time. And yeah, it exploded into a huge riot across loads of London. I mean, Mark Duggan specifically was a black guy who I think he'd been shot dead on a, you know, on the street by the police, and that was what actually sparked it. But it was clearly a sort of massive alienation between law enforcement and you know, young people, particularly, that had led to this sort of build up of hostility that eventually exploded, you know, into
Hey in chat said,
loss or
wasn't it
riot.
2011? I think it might have been 2011, maybe close to 2010.
Yeah, or 2012 maybe. Yeah, but it was
around those times.
Yeah, summertime, I think it was. Anyway,
It's interesting times, man. That was a crazy time here because that stuff doesn't usually happen, and it seemed to spread across the country as well. It went to all the different cities and lots of riots. Interesting times, man.
Yeah, and it you know, it was very clearly connected to just a huge sense of alienation, and that people had just felt you know, felt that the streets were essentially a hostile place for them, and that the you know, the society itself was something that they felt they didn't have a stake in, you know. I think the fact, if it's something as personal as just what you're choosing to, you know, do in your free time, and how, like you say, how you're choosing to, you know, enjoy your own freedom of your own mind, you know, it's a really, it's a deeply sort of intrusive thing to do to someone, you know, just to sort of yeah.
So yes, we got one more to finish up on. Bubble Huck's been sitting there so quiet, so patient for the whole news so far.
I've just been listening, you know.
Cool.
It's always good to
He's
hear
asleep,
that
man.
Shitload. He smoked a shitload already, didn't he? That's what it is.
I was hammering dabs that whole time.
Savage. But we got. I can't read this news story because I'm not a subscriber. Are you a subscriber to these?
I'm
guys?
not a subscriber.
Oh right. This article is for subscribers only. Wow.
No, well,
But,
I've never subscribed to the Australian Financial Review. So
Good.
fuck
Don't give money to
going on
the
there.
big media.
Oh,
Good.
me, let it be me. I was sorry, yeah. Right up my street. I can't get enough of Australian finance news myself.
Yeah,
All over it.
there was a few I could have picked, and I only picked this one because, you know, it's always look. I'm all for people making money, but when it comes to this, I just I'm not a fan of big pharma being in the game as much as they are, and the fact that it's all you know, they're the ones with their hand in the pocket. Anyway, I'll get into it before I go on my own little rant. Struggling cannabis merchant owes National Australia Bank $61 million. So, National Australia Bank backed cannabis merchant Can Group revealed it is running out of cash on Friday as the debt owed to the bank grew by 5.3 million to 60.96 million. While its
Wow.
investment while its investment in a 115 million Victorian cannabis warehouse facility pressures its solvency. NAB did not. Yeah, it's big money. NAB did not respond to a request for comment on the status of the debt facility Can Group first obtained in December 2020 to finance the warehouse's construction in Mildura in Victoria. The cannabis merchant's cash flow statement showed it posted an operating cash loss of 5.3 million on sales, up 23% to 5.1 million for the quarter to June 30, with available cash on hand of only 764,000. The company declined to comment on its cash flow pressure or the debt made up by a drawn 50 million bank facility.
Too ashamed, man. I just don't want to talk about it right now.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about your cash flow problems? No thanks. No. Where are we? So 15 million working capital facility. The Mildura facility also received financial support from the Victorian government's Regional Jobs Fund, but shareholder support has evaporated with the stock cratering 90% since 2020. It gets worse. Its horror run included a $3.6 million cybersecurity loss after it said it was duped into making payments for works at the Mildura facility to an unknown third party and to become a victim of a sophisticated cyber fraud against the company and its overseas contractor. On Friday, the cannabis retailer added it raised $4.46 million from retail shareholders as part of a capital raising in July, although it initially targeted $11.7 million. It's also flagged plans to raise cash by lodging a claim for a government tax refund in financial 2023, alongside a potential deal to sell part of its cultivation facilities and certain business assets for $5.48 million to medicinal cannabis rival Sativate Ltd. Some of the cash raised will be used to support plans to produce 12.5 tons of cannabis on an annualized base, the company said. So yes, cannabis companies losing money in Australia.
Wow.
I just thought it's huge money, 61 million.
Maybe that's what MasterCard's worried about.
The takeaway I took from it was the stock cratering by 90% since
crazy,
2020. Man. That's huge.
Mm.
But the biggest thing I see this pushing is we don't have a rec market. Our medical market is basically morphing into a rec market at this point. And the more that these medicinal guys and since the government has their hand in that pocket, they're the ones making money from it. I think this is going to help that push towards the legal market and a personal use market, I should say, instead of rec. Because we've now got bills in every state now, and federally pushing for legalizing adult use. So we'll see. Maybe more of these companies need to start losing more money before they start going open up the market.
Yeah, and I think they will. They will continue to lose money. Just not doing it right, you know.
Especially considering most of the stuff that's coming into Australia comes from Europe.
It's so there was another. We're selling off some of our cultivation space. It's like, can I buy some? You know what I mean? Could you buy some bubble hawk? Just a normal guy in Australia. Can I buy a piece of that cultivation shit? It's like, no, not you, not you.
Yeah. Can I just have that little corner over there? That's all I need. I just want that little corner. Will do. Look, there wasn't a whole lot of Australian cannabis news that I hadn't covered in the last few weeks, so this was the best of a bad bunch, I suppose.
Do you know if they were are they all operating indoors?
So majority of them are, because of the way that the laws are here for these they have to be, everything has to be fenced. They have to have static security guards. It has to not interfere with, like, so if the wind's blowing in a certain direction and a smell starts blowing towards a town or something, it can't be like that, can't happen.
So it's got to
and
be
I think
inside for that type of reason.
it's in, yeah, and security. So they've got to be able to show that they can't be ripped off. There are
I
a
mean-
few that are outdoors.
Yeah.
But it's more, when I say outdoors, I'm talking like greenhouse. So it's still it's still a secure facility either way.
But I mean, because Tasmania is like one of the world's major pharmaceutical opium producers, right? And I'm
It
sure
is,
that's
yeah.
not happening indoors. So to me, that just
No.
seems bizarre. I mean,
Yeah, no,
forcing
that's the argument we've
it
been
to-
making for
Yeah.
years. It's just ridiculous. There's fields and fields of poppy, but God forbid you have 3 or 4 cannabis plants in your backyard.
And I mean,
but yeah.
it's incredibly, sorry if I talked over you again, it's just to say it's incredibly not only uneconomical, but it's also incredibly unecological to have it inside if there's an option for it to be outside.
Yeah,
Which
I
Australia-
honestly think that the majority of it, they're scared that it's just going to get ripped off. Like, we smoke a fuck ton. Like, that's the metric, is a fuck ton.
It is in
of
Australia,
cannabis.
yeah. I heard
Yeah,
that,
true
yeah.
story.
that's
True story.
Like, yeah, true story. It doesn't even need more dragons. It's plenty of dragons. We quite literally smoke a lot of cannabis here. So their fear is that if it is out in the open, people are either going to go in and rip it off, or kids might walk into the field and grab a bud off a plant. And it's just, whether it's they're, using that as an excuse to keep everything, under their wing, or whether it's just out of the fear of the devil cannabis plant, or whatever it happens to be. It stifles a lot. As I said, there are some companies out there that are doing, open air, sun grown cannabis, but it's not as many. And then most of these facilities that are going up, especially the ones with big capital like this, they're all indoors. They're all under lights.
I mean, to me, I mean, it's the whole thing. Unless legislation is introduced in certain countries to effectively protect their markets, if they were to actually make a real free market globally, like a global free market in cannabis, where it was just no holds barred competition, you would find many countries getting wiped out very, very quickly. Because when crop scientists look at these indoor facilities particularly, but not only, I mean, outdoors as well, in terms of the yield per hectare that you would get if you let a crop scientist of the kind who bred all these sort of high density, high yield versions of wheat and corn and whatever, if you gave them 5 years, 10 years to work on cannabis, nobody would be growing the way that we're growing now, with these big branchy plants with these huge spaces between the rows and stuff. They'd have varieties bred that would be able to just be like a single stick with the bud on that, and the amount you'd be able to pack into a hectare would be just astronomically higher, and
we'll see. We've had a lot of hemp farmers coming through now. That's really starting to gain traction, especially with things like hempcrete and stuff like that. Hemp plastics, all the CBD items and stuff that are coming on board. That's fine, and a majority of those are grown open air. But I think it's because we have really strict guidelines as to what can be used in the medicinal market, and therefore a lot of the stuff that we produce here does actually end up overseas. More of the stuff produced here ends up overseas than it ever does getting to market here in Australia. And in fact, a lot of the stuff that medicinal patients here in Australia consume comes from overseas. So it's
Yeah.
just all
I
up
talked
on
to a
its head.
guy based in London who is involved in producing somewhere in Africa. I forget where it is, but a lot of what he was selling was going to Australia, somewhere like Zimbabwe or somewhere he was growing, or Zambia or something.
Yeah.
And for the
Yeah,
Australian market, yeah.
it like, I mean, we've got some of the best growing conditions on the planet,
Yeah, it's
and
madness, man.
and we, you know, and we're smoking stuff that comes from, you know, Africa, or a lot comes out of Europe as
Canada,
well.
yeah.
Canada,
And the
yeah,
other side
like
of the fucking coin completely, you know.
And Canada's
it's
got
all
dreadful fucking conditions, even though there was that big Vancouver market, you know, production thing, probably still is, but compared to Australia, man, it's like I would fucking love to be able to work in an Australian climate. You know, I mean, obviously it's anyway, but the type of stuff I like, you know, that used to be smuggled in to Australia. I met a few characters who used to bring stuff from Thailand in the 60s and 70s, you know, on yachts. they'd get it all.
It's wild.
Yes, and they'd ship. They just like go on a big long holiday and then sail down through the Malay Archipelago down, you know, to wherever it was, Queensland or whatever. But yeah.
Well, anyway, we're pushing very long, much longer than the usual episode. The 420 has already passed, everybody. So if you haven't smoked yet because of 420, then smoke now, because I'm reminding you to. COVID, how about that? So I'll force you to smoke. That's like our swear word, Angus. If anybody says COVID, you just
go for every flag today.
Oh yeah, go for all the flags.
I was wondering what that COVID was about. Maybe I thought it was like some cider-induced hallucinations.
Yeah, did he say the C word? Did he say it's like it's the swear jar word. Once if you say the C word, then everybody has to smoke. That's how it is. But got a couple of articles of forum news here we could cover. Well, I say articles, a couple of sentences. With congratulations to Turpopotamus for winning the HLG Veg 250 Grow Light in the Heads or Tails competition this week.
Yes,
So congrats to Turpo. That should be with you tomorrow. They're already sending that shit out. So it's either tomorrow or the next day. They're very fast with their shipping. And then we also have congrats to Dr. X for winning the HLG 320 in the Patreon competition. Which is very cool, man. Giving out lights all over the place. And then the next light competition will be starting on the 1st of August. So keep your eye out for that, everybody. And you can come and get involved in the competition over on Percy's. And you might be able to win a grow light as well. Very cool.
True. Yes.
And then just one more thing. On Thursday, we have an interview with Matt Lammers. Remember Matt Lammers on the show a while ago? He's a cannabis journalist. So he's going to be returning to the show to come and chat to us about, you know, cannabis journalism and stuff. So stay tuned for that. But I think that's everything, right? That's all the cannabis news and events wrapped up there. We can take a quick break now and smoke some cannabis. Let's do it. Let's do a smoke break. Nice. Here we are. Right, yeah, so chill, everybody. Let me grab that mic here and let it warm up. Ooh.
I'm going to grab a coffee. I shall return.
Sweet. Everybody grab drinks. If you need. Grab yourself a cider, Angus. Now is the time if you need another cider, bro.
I think I've had plenty, thanks. Yeah.
Weak.
Oh no, we don't do peer pressure thing.
No, the shelves are
considering
empty.
there's peer pressure. Oh no.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't need much. Don't need much encouragement.
Man, we've had a couple of drunken episodes here. Monkey got drunk one episode, didn't you, Monkey?
I think I did.
And then I got drunk on whiskey just a few weeks ago. I was pretty drunk during his show because I had some whiskey. It's Bubble Hawk's turn next, is what we like to say. But you know, for him, it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, so it's a bit degenerate for him to be getting drunk. You know,
it's
Could be a hell of a day. Yeah, bad day.
Starters, you mean to go on and all that? God damn. But yes, quick shout out to everybody in the chat. Hope you're all smoking something nice. Just the mighty is nearly there. You've been having some nice stuff recently, haven't you, Monkey? You got some new products in, some new vaping stuff.
Yeah, Arizer sent me a Solo 2 portable vape and an XQ2 desktop vape to test. See if I like them, and maybe we'll talk to them and maybe sponsor Percy's, but we haven't reached that point yet, but we're in talks with them. But yeah, I've been evaluating the two. Actually, Mrs. Monkey's been doing most of the evaluation on the portable. I used it several times, liked it, so I said, hey, see what you think about this. Hadn't got it back yet, so I guess that's a good report.
Nice. You're just checking that shit.
Well, I got it back. I got it back, and it was said, "This needs to be charged." That's when I got it back.
Right. You'll get it back soon. It'll be like, this needs to be cleaned. Can you do that for me?
Yeah, that was last night. That was the question. How long till this has to be cleaned? You're right. You know how that works. They'll get you to do it if they can.
We had an interesting question in the chat here, Angus, if you want to cover it, but if not, feel free to say no. But Chilbert said, and it's from Sungrown Mids who asked it initially, it was during the news. I'm wondering if Angus would like to address Ernest Small's work as an expert witness for prosecutors in the US, Canada, and Australia, opposing the so-called botanical defense. What's all that about?
Right. So to relate it to something really immediate to everyone, it's essentially the historic sort of point at which the language that we use to talk about cannabis was born, in terms of indica, sativa, ruderalis, that whole jargon used by growers and smokers and so on. That there was a series of trials began in the States in which lawyers, the press referred to them as dope lawyers, who would defend clients busted on drugs charges. Famously, names like Michael Mad Dog Metzger was one of these guys who used to defend, the Grateful Dead and Timothy Leary and people like that. Developed a defense based around the idea that the legislation prohibiting marijuana, to use that word, used the name cannabis sativa and therefore could not be said to cover other species such as cannabis indica and cannabis ruderalis if you took the view that cannabis consisted of several species.
Right, yeah.
So they called in expert witnesses, these lawyers, to testify that they believed cannabis was polytypic, not monotypic, meaning it consisted of 3 species, and that it was up to the government, the prosecution, to prove that the material in question was actually cannabis sativa. It didn't work out long term, in the sense of this defense did succeed, thankfully, in getting some people off the charges, but long term it failed as a defense. In fact, one of the first most important cases in which it was used, the Rothberg case, already set a precedent for it not being accepted. And after some time, it became established that, if this defense was used, that the court wouldn't even call in the expert witness botanists for the defense or even the prosecution, because it was seen to be a complete non sequitur, because the view was taken that clearly, and it is very clear, that the legislation is intended to cover all forms of cannabis. There was no debate in the 1930s over whether cannabis consisted of 1 species or more. Clearly the legislation was intended to cover it. So, long term, the historic impact of that defense being used was mostly through Richard Evans Schultes to create a kind of real disconnect between the main scientific literature's use of the terminology and the popular terminology of indica sativa ruderalis. So, there's a lot of confusion, but they're asking me, Sungrown Mids is asking me, what do I think of it on moral grounds? I think he's taking that thing like about Ernest Small, who's a Canadian scientist who's one of the best sort of known scientific authorities on the cannabis plant. And I mean, it's obvious to me that Small didn't take part in those things because he wanted to see people get sent down. You know, he appeared to provide his view on whether cannabis consisted of one species or several, you know, and that's all he did. And he did voluntarily go to appear at trials in the States to provide his. He wasn't under any obligation to do so, and he did appear at trials in the States, you know. But I've spoken to him about it, and he's very unhappy about the fact that there were people who were sent down for what, in his view, is an extremely unjust and cruel law, you know. But as a scientist, he wasn't happy at all with this defense being used, you know. It has other consequences. So you could theoretically, I mean, in a less serious example, it could be used for example, to try and argue that beer should be banned, because some scientists say that you should classify hops as cannabis lupulus, so it would be a sort of a variety of cannabis, and then you could theoretically use it to argue that some people don't qualify as being Homo sapiens, you know, some groups of humans. You know, you could argue that, I don't know, some African pygmies aren't real humans, they should be classified as Homo something else, whatever, you know. I mean, that probably isn't satisfactory as to some people's minds as why this character Ernie Small was appearing, you know. But Sungrow Mids' argument is that Small received UN funding for some of his work back in the 80s, I think it was. But to get funding for any science involving cannabis back then was nearly impossible, you know.
Yeah.
So in terms of he would sort of, you know, present his funding case on the grounds that it was important to understand cannabis to even talk about it without having the phrasing in front of me, it's not right. But as things he said have been misconstrued to try and make out that he's a prohibitionist, you know, and he obviously isn't. It's really tangential because most people don't know who he is. But it's interesting in the sense that Richard Evans Schultes, I would say very obviously, and Small certainly thinks very obviously, this Schultes is very famous, right? I mean, we know. Does everyone like know who I'm even talking about? I assume people do. He's a Harvard ethnobotanist for Richard Evans Schultes. So he was one of the big writers on, you know, peyote, ayahuasca, cannabis. He wrote books with Albert Hoffman, the LSD guy, like Plants of the Gods and stuff. Like,
right.
So he was a. Tell me to shut up if I'm talking too long, because I know we've got.
No, mate, carry on. You're good.
He was a Harvard ethnobotanist who became a kind of a figure amongst the counterculture, especially in the States, even though he himself was a very conservative character, Schultes, and he spent a lot of time in the Amazon River contacting tribes about like DMT containing herbs, you know, and ayahuasca and things back in, you know, we're talking in the like 50s and stuff, when it just wasn't really much known about. And then by the 60s, people had discovered his publications. He became this quite celebrated figure. And he and Emberden, I think, who also started to appear in cases to argue that cannabis consisted of 3 species. Both of them had in their publications on cannabis for up to about 1971 had just articulated very clearly the view that it is just one species. And then both of them had this sudden kind of change of heart, let's say, before a case involving a guy called Mitchell Rothberg and a bunch of other people in New York, and another one involving Eric Honeyman in California, and his brother and various other people who had brought in fuckloads of Afghan hashish from Kandahar. And both had got busted, one coming into California, one coming into New York. And for very, very large amounts that, like, at that point, this simply hadn't been seen in the States, you know, big amounts of Afghan hash. And they were, it's difficult to say, but in the view of the DEA, they were tied to an outfit called Brotherhood of Eternal Love that was producing huge amounts of LSD at that point. And they were Brotherhood were using hashi imports to pay for the distribution of huge amounts of acid for free through the Grateful Dead parties. Don't know if this is ringing any bells for people.
No.
But suffice to say, Michael Mad Dog Metzger, who was the lawyer who defended these guys in these cases, attempted to incentivize people involved in the case to change their opinions, let's say. And
Right.
he encouraged Shorties to make a trip to Afghanistan, and you can see Shorties there in the photos. Anyway, suffice to say, he's appearing there with people who were the hash suppliers for the Brotherhood, you know, and it's. I think in the view of everyone who was appearing against Shorties in these cases, Shorties had clearly didn't actually believe that cannabis was 3 species. And if you read his publications on it after this point, he doesn't really attempt to make any serious argument that they are 3 species. He still says that, so that's what he thinks, you know. But Shorties was a radical libertarian, you know. He fucking hated the Nixon administration. He hated the Kennedy administration. He even argued that he thought the American Revolution was a historic mistake, you know, like in the sense that he kind of was like a right-wing libertarian, you know, like every time there was a presidential election, you'd vote for Queen Elizabeth, you know. And
fair play.
in terms of like on questions of like personal freedom and stuff, like he wouldn't even like, he hated what he called socialism, you know. He hated Kennedy because he was too much of a socialist. Like he wouldn't walk down certain streets that were renamed after Kennedy, like when Jackie Onassis came around.
The hatred runs deep. Shit.
Yeah, because he was a socialist, right? And then when Jackie Onassis came around Harvard, like apparently Shorty's like hid in a cupboard so he didn't have to talk to and anyway, like he was quite eccentric, you know. I mean, I think he's great, but I don't for 1 minute think he seriously believed that cannabis consists of 3 species. I think it's great that he managed to get people off who on that basis. It was a prank, you know? And a long-running prank, in my view, that he kept up this facade of really thinking that. And everyone who faced him thinks that. They were pretty horrified by what he did, because from the point of view of a scientist, you know, they had to go in there and say what they really thought. I'm sure they'd have loved to have said that it wasn't, you know, but as scientists, it's like to go in and like bullshit. It's a fundamental breach of what you're meant to be doing in that situation and your duties as a scientist, even if you don't agree with the law, you know. I think most people would say that. Of course, in terms of the ethical question of Small doing that, it's like, yeah, it's not great, you know, to be part of something that did that. You know, that sent people down, right? But his actual none of what the judges. No, the reason the case failed historically, that argument failed, is because it became, you know, the judges were like, okay, actually, yeah, the legislation says legislation is there to ban all cannabis, you know.
Well, usually, you know, during these 20 minutes in between the 2 sections of the show, we talk about some absolute shit, mate. This is probably the deepest we've ever gone. You know, this is some crazy shit, man. This is some good info here. I didn't know about any of this stuff.
Yeah, it's a funny history of why we actually talk about cannabis in the way we do. You know, yeah, it's surprisingly not well known. You know,
That's it. This is where we got to get you back on so we can go into more detail with this kind of stuff. It's interesting stuff, man. We'll just get you back on and be like, okay, start from the beginning. You just fill us in on all these details, man. God damn. Is everybody back anyway? Do we have Marge here?
I feel like I left for like 5 minutes, and
Yeah, I'm
like
here.
Yeah, I'm here too.
there's just been a whole half the show I've missed.
Yeah, pretty much, mate. Pretty much.
It's my own fault. I accidentally put salt in my coffee instead of sugar.
Oh, good morning.
Oh, there we go. Now that makes sense.
Oh,
You wait.
This is what happens. This is what happens when you have a chef's kitchen and you've got containers that aren't marked, because you know what it is. but
sure you
not
do.
when.
No, right. It's the one in the middle. It's definitely sugar. Right.
Yeah.
But we should let's go on with the grow guides, man, because we're running a little bit late, which is all good. But Angus, I'm sure you got lots to teach us here as well, man. It's going to be very interesting. So, are we all ready to go to the grow guides?
Do it.
We are.
Let's do it. Episode 76 of the Grow Guides this week, everybody. And we're talking about landraces, hybrids, and phenotypes, which could essentially be put down as different types of cannabis. But we have a special guest here today for to talk about landraces and stuff, and he knows his shit, man. So we're going to be asking him plenty of questions throughout the Grow Guides section. That's Angus. Angus, you want to say hi? Say hi, Angus.
Hello, everybody. Great to be here.
Yes. So, where do we even start, man? Let's just start off with has anybody on the panel ever grown a landrace? I personally have never done it. I would like to, but I've never had the opportunity to. But Marge, have you ever grown a landrace or even smoked a landrace?
Well, I mean, people tell me it's a landrace sometimes, back in the day or whatever, but was it really? It's always
Very
up for
true.
debate. But no, I have not grown any.
What about you, Monkey?
I've grown bag seed, but I can't tell you that it was a landrace.
Right.
Brian, what was it called?
Just bag seeds.
Oh, bag seeds, right.
Mexican bag seed. It could have come from a landrace, but who knows?
What about you, Bubble? What's it like around Australia way? Can you get landrace?
I mean, I'm sure I could. There are a few I'd like to try, but I haven't. Yeah, you know what I'm like, man. I'm like, oh, terps, and then
look, it's cannabis.
The whole landrace thing goes out the window when I see like, all these flavors of berries and things. Actually, I would like a nice Afghan hash. That would be nice. And I was looking at Angus's site, and I found a few that I like. So if you get a random order from Australia, you know what it is.
Yeah,
I've been shopping.
I do get orders from Australia quite often. Yeah.
How do you go getting them through?
Say again?
Sorry, how do you go getting them here? Do you have many issues getting them in?
Generally not, but yeah, it's one of the places that has got a well-earned reputation for being pretty stringent. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, most things arrive. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
5% plus.
So for anybody out there who doesn't know what we're talking about when we say landrace, do you want to explain what a landrace is and quickly mention your website as well so people can go there and have a look?
Yeah, so my site is The Real Seed Company, and the URL is just therealseedcompany.com.
Nice.
Landraces, it's just traditional strains, old school strains that were grown prior to the 70s, the origins of modern hybrid cannabis that most people smoke these days is sort of the mid 70s-ish, late 60s through to the mid 70s. The origins of most of these strains, like skunk, in terms of when they started to be bred, the foundational strains of the foundational hybrid strains, like haze, skunk, northern lights, those type of big name hybrids that are the foundation of, or are in the vast majority of what people consume these days, despite the different names and so on. They began during a process of what economists would call import substitution. So as the United States transitioned from being a country that imported the vast majority of its marijuana, I don't like the word, but just to distinguish it from hemp and stuff, imported the vast majority of its marijuana. It transitioned from that to producing its own and having its own indigenous cannabis production. That's when all these things began. Prior to that, traditional cannabis, came from places historically going way back, such as India, Afghanistan, Thailand, Nepal, Asia being where species itself originates. And this term landrace is a very, very misleading term, in that it's given many people the impression that these plants are wild creations of nature alone, in which human beings themselves played no part, which is exactly not what landraces are. Landraces are all, it's a term for domesticates. It means country breed if you translate it literally into English. Right. And there are two main types of landrace. Two main types of traditional cannabis domesticate, and the names for them that we use because of that Schultes case I was talking about just back then are, indicas and sativas. Not in italics, not in the formal scientific sense, just in the sort of pop jargon, countercultural taxonomy. Indicas and sativas. Indicas have their point of origin somewhere in Central Asia, around the Hindu Kush and Xinjiang in China, Turkestan. That sort of broad region of Central Asia is where indicas originate. The big fat leaves and all that. And then sativas are originate in South Asia, probably East India, or the East Indies in the old-fashioned sense of that whole area around the Bay of Bengal. So Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, those types of places. They're tropical domesticates, and they're more intensively selected for potency historically because of people consuming them in the form of bud. So if you're a ganja smoker in India, in the 17th, 18th century or whatever, you can keep the seed from a really good potent batch of bud and you use that next year to grow your personal stash. Historically, imagine that going on over centuries and centuries, and that's why even back in the pre-hybrid era, Thai stick and so on, when it was analyzed in government labs, could show you kind of 20% THC level, 17% THC it is in some of the UK government tests. And that's not tweaking the tests, that's not gaming it to try and make it seem stronger than it is, So this was potent cannabis, even after sitting on a boat in, or in some customs seizure warehouse. It still showed that kind of potency, And whereas landraces used to grow hashish in Afghanistan and places, a farmer in the process of dry sieving the hash and so on, will just pull together the buds from all the plants. At the end of the process, he's got a big pile of seeds because that's a seeded crop up in Central Asia. They'll use the seeds for food and so on over winter. And at the end of that, they'll have a big pile of seeds that aren't specific to any one particular plant in the field, So you have a much lighter selective pressure for potency going back over the generations. Of course, you do still have potency, if you grow, even 20, 30 landrace seeds, unselected as in the sense not worked in the West, you grow a bunch of them, you will find plants in there that are significantly over 10% THC. And if you spent enough time, you could find some even higher than that, up into 15% THC plus. But you've got to do some work, Whereas if you grow 20, 30 landrace seeds from Thailand or whatever, even if you grow 5, you're going to find a plant that's like 15% THC plus easily. In fact, probably most of them will be if it's a strain with decent potency, I mean, I know like THC figures and stuff, there's a whole fucking lot that needs to be said about that whole thing, but I'm just using those kind of figures to give you a sense of the potency we're talking about. So in hash landraces, you will also find plants that are really low in THC in amongst the population, Right. Single digit, because it's a crop that's designed for making hash, and a typical lump of traditional hashish. We can be talking about like really high grade hashish, unbelievably sticky, really nice flavors, just fucking absolutely packed with aromas, but it's still not gonna typically be it's going to be weight for weight similar potency to a really potent batch of bud, and sometimes with the shitty Moroccan stuff that people used to get, it could be way down from that even, crapo kind of Moroccan hash, but what you're getting instead of that THC is a lot of other cannabinoids like CBD and that kind of stuff is the main one. So you can get a lot of hash that's 1-to-1 THC CBD kind of ratios is pretty typical, and there are reasons for that. Again, it's all about not having that intensive selection for potency. And in Lebanon also, you've got another issue, which is that hemp was introduced into Becker Valley at one point by the Americans, which I think is why Lebanese hashish these days has particularly high levels of CBD. That's apparently genetically, they've discovered recently through genomics that the reason why you get high CBD marijuana cultivars have cropped up is through hybridization with hemp cultivars. So Lebanese hashish tends to have a lot of CBD, can often be higher in CBD than it is in THC these days. But in a typical field, you have three main types of plant in a Lebanese hash landrace field. Like one is very high in CBD, one is equal in THC and CBD, and the other is high in THC, low in CBD. I'm talking ratio wise, like high low. So you balance that all out, and you've got like basically a lump of hash that's 1-to-1 THC CBD. Whereas in the sinsemilla populations, like sativas, you can have no CBD at all in the plants. If you analyze a bunch of them, you can find many with like basically zero-ish CBD and almost entirely THC. And that's a sort of selection for potency showing. Yeah. Anyway, I hope that gives a rough picture. Fucking waffled on there, didn't I?
Yeah, we're known to waffle.
But it's not that you waffled on, mate, because it's all good content. It's all good information. It's not like yeah. I don't think there's anybody out there who didn't just appreciate everything they just heard, man. That was very fucking cool. Well,
Can you describe hash for us again?
Yeah, it seems to be people like that description of hash there. But I was thinking, when it comes to land races, right? You got this whole finger quotation marks coming here. The sativa indica thing.
Yeah.
So, let's say there's two different land races that are both sativa. You breed those two together. That's not a hybrid, is it? That's just another version of because they're both sativa.
It's a hybrid.
You would consider that a hybrid.
So if you go to Thailand or Laos and talk to the ganja farmers, they will use, like the Lao ganja farmers I talk to, use the Lao term for hybrid, like basom or mixed, which is to refer to their strains. And so they know that most of their good strains, i.e. good as in really smelly, sticky, potent, vigorous plants, they know that those have come about through people crossing different land races, different Lao or Thai land races. So, you've got a lot of biodiversity in Laos. It's a very mountainous country. It's very easy for, the villages are very isolated. It's got a low population density. It's very easy for populations to develop without, strain to develop there without having any mixing with other strains. But they know, that if they see some new stuff, some ganja they've never seen before, they know, this is a Lao landrace that's come from somewhere else. Like what people are growing around where I am isn't like this. And then they know that the really good varieties they've got have come about through those crossings. So most land races are hybrids between land races. A sativa cross, you're still going to get some hybrid vigor. And
it's just like usually when you go to seed banks and you're looking at buying seeds, rarely nowadays you'll find sativa indica, and then you wouldn't ever, well, you can, but it's very difficult to find something that's 100% sativa or indica. You tend to find these hybrids, and the term hybrid. Yeah, it seems to be on seed banks that you get this. The term hybrid means a mix between sativa and indica, but a hybrid can also mean a mix between two different indicas and sativa when you come down to
hybrids are hybrids. But it's worth bearing in mind that sort of it can be really tricky trying to sort of shoehorn traditional cannabis culture into the sort of template that we understand it through seed banks, And the thing you mentioned of there not being any genuinely pure sativas and genuinely pure indicas around, that's symptomatic of a much deeper problem in terms of cannabis biodiversity and the future of breeding new interesting stuff, is that everything is getting hybridized out of existence. So hybridization, is the opposite of biodiversity in simple terms. So it's a real problem that that these things haven't been kept. You know, they've disappeared because of people, you know, getting busted, or just primarily disappeared because of people not being systematic about how they keep these strains going. You know, so there is a tendency for for people like to hybridize stuff. You know, like people who buy Landraces off me. You know, they're not most of them involved in any kind of conscious attempt to maintain the biodiversity of what they've got. And the most exciting thing often is just to cross some stuff together and see what happens. It is very good fun, but the end result of that, yeah, is in hemp and in you know, marijuana. I hate the word, but just keep using it. You know, you talk to any crop scientists involved in this. Like one guy I'm in contact with in the States was just at a hemp conference, and he was saying, yeah, all the talk is about how we're hemorrhaging biodiversity because everything's getting hybridized with everything. And you know, I would say people who do grow in the sort of meaningful numbers of plants, yeah, it's so worthwhile keeping what you have pure. Even now, as it's all disappearing, it's getting even more worthwhile to do in many ways, because long term, you know, it's actually much better to have a whole bunch of pure, right? Pure as in, you know, not just hybridy stuff. There's an illusion of biodiversity, you know, with all these names and aromas. It's very easy to lose sight of the fact that actually most of them have a pretty narrow base in just a fairly small amount of genetics that was going around in Amsterdam. A lot of it, you know, of course there are North American creations that didn't come via the Amsterdam scene, but not as many as you'd like, you know. So much of it comes from a small number of people, you know, and originally, you know, and it's sort of behind this veil of exciting names. It's actually genetically not nearly as diverse as we need, you know, and all the diversity is in the land races, and particularly actually in the wild, genuine, you know, wild, not land, you know, land races, like I said, doesn't mean wild. Like the wild growing populations in Asia have almost all of the biodiversity, you know, so hidden in the genetics of these rather unexciting looking, weedy looking plants that grow wild around the Himalayas and stuff. There's a huge amount of breeding potential, you know. You start selecting those, and you will eventually, you know, particularly ones that grow around traditional areas of cultivation, you spend enough time selecting those, and you would eventually be able to recreate some really amazing things, you know. And they have traits that are increasingly really important, like, you know, drought resistance, disease resistance, medicinal properties will be in there, you know, all kinds of stuff will be in there, and it's going to become more and more important to have it as the climate falls to pieces, you know. Right. And the production needs to be, you know, outdoors in long term, you know, unless someone invents some magical energy creating thing, it's going to have to all happen out under the sun, you know. It's really bad news how everyone's growing indoors, you know. Commercially, you know, it's not cool, you know. I saw some figures that, like, you know, it's 1 kilo of bud is sort of equivalent to fuck knows how many gallons of gasoline, you know. Yeah, I don't know how many it actually is, but it was pretty horrifying, the energy expenditure.
Yeah, it's not the most sustainable way to grow. Sorry, Marge.
No, I was just gonna agree. It's not very environmentally friendly, indoor growing.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah, it's a shame, man. It's what we're stuck with, what most of us are stuck with right now.
Yeah, I'm not trying to sort of guilt trip or down at people, but yeah, like there's definitely, the industry really needs to have a fucking, I mean, you know, he says going straight back to guilt tripping and downing, but yeah, the industry really needs to have a fucking word with itself about how things are being done. You know, it's completely uncool. And the few people I've seen sort of you know, ostensibly starting conversations about it, then I sort of, like Steve D'Angelo and stuff did some things, and then I looked, and actually he sort of isn't really, you know. Right. Like he was going around some grows in Colombia where people kind of had lights strung up outside in the tropics in the middle of the night so they could grow indicas on a hillside in Colombia, and God knows what that would be doing to the local ecology in itself. Never mind, you know.
We've covered stories about it in the past, man. Yeah, it was in Australia, was it, Bubble Huck? It was, wasn't it? There was a farm in Australia that didn't properly black out their lights, and it was affecting the wildlife.
Oh yeah, that was that's
Pink
they had
Scout
a
story,
whole
yeah.
It gave the
whole
fucking
town just
koalas
saw this.
chlamydia. Yeah.
It did not give they did that to themselves. All right.
Yeah, dirty little beasts.
Yeah, they are dirty little beasts and they don't like tourists. I was gonna say, oh yeah. So apparently they forgot to close the roof. So they had this facility where the roof opens and closed, and during the day they'd have it open to let the sunlight through, and then they'd close it up and have the lights on. And they forgot to close the shutters, so they'd left the lights on. There was this that blurple glow coming from it, and people were all freaking out, thinking the
God.
world was going to end. And it turned out it was just a massive cannabis farm. So it was secret, not so secret anymore.
It's fun though. Yeah, you see those blurple lights, and a home grower automatically sees that color and knows exactly what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, grow lights.
Immediately
Yeah.
knew.
Yep,
Yeah.
no question.
Around where I am, people just have grow lights just on, like, in their apartments, and just like brazening it out. You know what I mean? Like, they're ostensibly growing some cactuses and stuff, but I'm sure around here many people have a few little plants going as well. You know.
I've thought about it a few times. It's like you could just grow some exotic plants. For example, Venus
Yeah.
flytraps. You're going to fuckload of those, right? And you grow them indoors because you want them to be grown specially. And then you call the old bill on yourself. He's growing something in there, and after 3 or 4 times, and then coming around and checking it, it's just Venus flytraps. Surely they're gonna stop checking. Then you can just fucking bank your gantry in there, right? And they ain't gonna come out and check.
It may just be my city, but Bristol, I think, like, the cops have just lost interest in weed, really. You know.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice, but yeah.
So let's get back to this topic here with the whole hybrid thing, because
Yeah.
I've always known hybrid just to be a certain percentage sativa and a certain percentage indica, but those terms indica and sativa are always up for debate as well. Can you go into some detail about that? Like, what is the big differences? Is there any differences? Is it it's confusing.
Yeah. So, indica and sativa, as we use them, go back to those court cases I was talking about with Shorties, Richard Evans Shorties, trying to throw a spanner in the works, for very good reasons, of the Nixon administration's prosecution of people for growing cannabis and possessing cannabis and smuggling cannabis and stuff. So it was a deliberate attempt by Shorties, in my view, to, like, obfuscate the whole language around cannabis, to get people off these busts for growing cannabis sativa, which was intended to just mean any kind of cannabis by the legislation in the States. Just as a general catch-all term for the species and anything that comes from it. Anyway, sativas are, they are, you can separate them from indicas, Central Asian being indicas and South Asian being sativas, South Asian tropical plants, Central Asian, desert plants. And in terms of a conventional classical taxonomic key of a formal scientific classification, like in italics in the writing, capital for the first name, lowercase for the second. Yeah, you can develop a formal taxonomic key to separate indicas and sativas into two formal botanical varieties, So, in the formal taxonomy that's accepted by most botanists who are interested in subdividing cannabis into formal subcategories, hemp, the fiber plant, is Cannabis sativa subspecies sativa. And then all the drug type stuff, marijuana, whatever, there's no really good name for it. All drug type cannabis that gets you high, is subspecies indica. Right. And then sativas and indicas that we talk about are another level down, like subdivision within subspecies indica. Like, forget indica in the way we use it, right? This is the formal taxonomic meaning of it, in italics, Latinate stuff. Within subspecies indica, there are formal varieties in the formal sense, which are, so indicas are subspecies indica var afghanica.
Right.
And sativas are subspecies indica var indica. It's fucking like Shorty's really threw a fucking spanner in the works in terms of public understanding of being able to talk about cannabis, in my opinion. Anyway, they are two formal subspecies indica, like a sativas, subspecies afghanica are indicas. And yeah, in a formal taxonomic key based on like the morphology of the plants, the cannabinoid ratios, and the high, the appearance of them, so indicas sort of short plants. They don't go over 2 meters much if you grow them outdoors. They have certain, aromas, and they're associated with them, the skunky smells, which go, you hear the skunky aroma of them described way back in, the early, in the 1910s when Americans collected them first and took them back to Nevada, it was the first thing they noticed is this fucking skunky reek, whereas sativas go, more like 2 meters to 4 meters in height, given the space. Long, narrow leaflets, much higher levels of THC in the bud, almost no CBD. Aromas tend to be more like a sort of flowery or tobacco-y or kind of musky aromas. And you can separate them out absolutely in terms of a formal taxonomic key. And they are absolutely completely different types of plants that originate from, domesticating them for a different product. Sinsemilla in the case of sativas, which traditionally would be called ganja, and hashish or charas actually is the Central Asian name for hashish as well, which is what the indicas have been domesticated for production of. So yeah, they're definitely real things, so the real difference, but you just don't find them much in, you certainly won't find many real pure examples of either on most seed menus these days. And the ones you can find, like Afghani #1 as it's called, it's not a particularly nice plant in most people's reckoning. It hasn't been selected for like a nice buzz, particularly, many people say. It's got a reputation for a slightly kind of dysphoric buzz, and Sam Skunkman, who it comes from, even actually sort of publicly admitted that he actually never even used to fucking smoke it when he made seeds of it. He would just select it for whichever was most resinous and had the best yield. And he said he didn't even bother to smoke it. I don't know how much weight you want to put on that, but and then pure hazes, like, they are around, but you don't see them that much on seed banks these days, because it's like, it takes fucking ages to grow. It's quite a hassle to grow tools. They're not well suited.
16 to 20 week flowers and shit. Like, damn.
Yeah. I mean, in South Asia, sativas, they're grown as a 6-month crop, and whereas indicas, from that much further north, some of them are grown. Some of them, in some particularly higher up, they will be planted in, quite late sometimes, sort of June, July, and like harvested, late September, early October. And same with same in Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. They'll be planted sort of what would it be? I mean, they'll be harvested sort of late August, early September through to mid-September in Bekaa sometimes, and harvested and planted in mid-May, late May. They're really fast plants, the indica type ones, like 4 months ish, and 90 to 110 days. Some of the ones like from seed to harvest, that were collected, the more kind of wild leaning indicas. But yeah, the sativas like ganja landraces, they're not well suited to indoors.
So that pretty well covers the whole landraces and hybrids thing, and then we come up to the whole the phenotype things. And the phenotype is just essentially you have one cannabis plant, and let's say it makes loads of seeds, and then you plant all of these seeds. Each one of those different seeds will have a different phenotype, right?
Yeah, I mean, phenotype in the technical scientific meaning is simply everything that you can observe about a plant. It's like, the observable phenomena of the plant. and that's a product of an interaction between the genotype and the plant's environment. And cannabis is probably something, as a species, it came about in a mountain environment, and mountain environments have very changeable climates, extremely and changeable towards extremes, and consequently, cannabis has a lot of what's called phenotypic plasticity, meaning that it's evolved to express different phenotypes in different conditions. So if you take the same cannabis genetics and plant them in different places, you can have a quite high range of variation in how the same genetics will express themselves.
What was that word you used there? The phenotypic plasticity. What is that?
Yeah, phenotypic plasticity. Yeah,
man, that's an epic band name. That is.
Yeah.
like prog rock.
What was the other one that we had? Deplorable or deranged? Come on now. That's
Oh, you God, what was that one?
Oh, I do kind of remember that.
Pathological sloth.
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, random
right.
changes. So yeah, there you go. Anybody out there starting an indie band? There you go.
I think
more
the
name for you.
phenotypic plasticity's got to be prog rock, man. It's got to be like really overindulgent, self-indulgent prog rock.
No, the thing is, they can do loads of different varieties of song to be suitable towards their name. Some country, some R&B.
Bit of scat. Oh, there you go.
yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Skiffle.
Oh, shit, random. Sorry, yeah, you were talking about phenotypes.
No, I think it's quite important to bring the tone down on a regular basis. I can't stand too much of it myself, but yeah, you did ask. Where was I? Fuck knows. But yeah, what it means is like, as anyone who's got a lot of experience growing themselves knows, that like dialing in the right conditions for the strain you've got, getting to really know one strain well, you can have a really quite massive difference in the product quality, when you get it tuned in right, once you really get to know, skunk number one or whatever, you can really get your soil right and so on, and feeding regime right and so on, and yeah, you can really get a big difference, and that certainly applies with landraces as well, particularly the ganja landraces, sativas, as we call them. Any farmer who cultivates them is very aware of how important it is to have the right land for it. Traditional cannabis doesn't actually like, it doesn't, you'll find this if you try and grow landraces indoors, it doesn't like at all to be in sort of soggy, damp soil with its feet wet for prolonged amounts of time. Ganja cultivators in places like Kerala in South India and Bengal and Thailand that are really famous for making really good, and Laos really famous for making really good ganja. They try to find the best land they can for it. So in Bengal, in the days when the British were there, and described in great detail the techniques and the economy of the Bengali ganja industry, which was supplying, all of India. It was where all the a lot of the Caribbean ganja came from originally, is from exports from out of India, particularly places like Bengal and then over on the West Coast and stuff as well. But farmers there in those districts would pay a lot more money for some really good land with some really nice loamy soil that drained really well, sort of light sandy loams, that's what cannabis liked, and they would grow it on these elevated ridges. That they would plow the land into sort of elevated, like they'd have along like a raised, if you imagine, and if you got a drain and turned it over, that shape, like the roof drain, a semicircle, kind of thing. And in between that, you'd have the opposite, as it were, so the water would run off basically, so that when it rained, the cannabis wouldn't have its roots sitting in soggy land, you know. And it had to be quite rich soil, and as well, and they learned to get the feeding cycle right, you know. So it was very important not to overfeed it as well, to feed at the right time, water at the right time, and this was quite an art form to get it right. And you know, they'd have all kinds of other people involved, like specialist ganja doctors, podars, who'd come in to cut out the males and stuff at the right time and make sure they really spotted every single one, you know, any rogue male flowers on a female plant and stuff. So this was a big industry with a lot of techniques known, and it's the same over in Laos still, you know. The good quality high-end crop, that the ganja that sells for, you know, multiples of the price of the cheaper stuff, is produced by farmers who really know their stuff, who've got some good land with good access to water for irrigation, and they know not to like chuck loads of fucking chemical fertilizers on it. And you can hear you know, Bob Marley in Jamaica talking about how important it is, you know, don't feed, you know, they would just refuse to use synthetic chemical fertilizers on their ganja, you know.
Right.
And yeah, I've talked to Afghans about that as well, and you know, they say, yeah, like horse shit, horse manure, you know, is really good for cannabis. And I think they said kind of goat manure, sheep manure is good as well, but cow manure is not so good. Cow manure tends to make the soil too claggy and clot together and too heavy, whereas horse manure will lighten up the structure, make it breathe better and more permeable, you know. And that's what you'll get a nice product out of. So indoors in pots, you know, it's tough with land races. Some people are really good at it, but it's so much a case of less is more, you know. You've got to be really sensitive to what the plant's telling you. If you see it's clawing up, it's getting clawing leaves and stuff, you fucked up, you know.
I mean, when growing land races like that, how different is the, what was that word? The phenotypical. I don't know. How different is each plant to plant? Are they pretty much the same? Because I don't know.
Like
genetics tidier, you know. Do you get much different phenotype expression for it with each plant from each seed?
Yes, absolutely. But they're all recognizably part of the same group, if you know what I mean. So it's all definitely the same strain, and that will be obvious from the product as well at the tail end. But within northern land races, hash land races, there's a huge amount of variation, particularly from plant to plant, you know. And that can be in the smells as well, actually. So I'm slightly contradicting myself there. Like some plants, if you walk through a field of, you know, Chitrali land races from the Hindu Kush, yeah, you'll have like, it's like they clearly belong to the same group, but you can have one plant that is really dominated by sort of tangy candy type aromas, and then one that has a much heavier kind of diesely gasoline-y smell, and one more skunky, you know what I mean? And then the appearance of them as well with Chitrali land races can be, because Chitral is right at the frontier. It's in the Hindu Kush, but right at the sort of frontier between Central Asia and South Asia. So it's like you've got hybridity between indicas and sativas happening there, going back since forever. So it's like a zone of maximum biodiversity for cannabis. So in fields of Chitrali stuff, you can have like one really indica-looking plant, and then one, you know, sativa-looking plant, and then you can have sativas. Like I've got photos, if you look on the Instagram, like really indica leaves, like big fat, like leaflets, but then the plant's like fucking more than 4 meters high, you know. Yeah, so you have like all, it's so Chitral's an example of like really diverse stuff, but then within the population of genetically, like, you know, sativas are much more narrow, you know, because they're like a further away from the natural zone where cannabis grows wild, and they've been subject to much more selection. So their genetic base is much closer to like what modern hybrids are, like heavily selected, you know, and that much narrower. And then within the sort of phenotypic expression of them, yeah, you have more it's a more uniform, more standardized looking field, you know. But I wouldn't want to overstate that in the sense that if you look at pictures of fields of like late 19th century Bengali ganja, you'll see there's a lot of fucking diversity still, you know. But you know, aroma wise and so on, they're more, sativas are much more relatively speaking to indicas, like real indicas in Afghanistan or whatever, relatively speaking, sativas are much more uniform, and because of the, you know, being narrower genetically. So yeah, you get into the areas where cannabis grows wild, you know, like the Himalayas and the Hindu Kush in Central Asia, and you've got landrace populations that are swapping pollen with wild populations. So it's much more genetically diverse in the northern areas, and it's much less subject to heavy breeding by people because it's, you know, it's a hash crop.
Yeah, man, very interesting shit. We've gone into lots of details there.
Yeah, I hope it's not getting too detailed. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good, man. People enjoy it, you know. We all enjoy this kind of content where we learn things. Because we've gone through the landraces, the hybrids, phenotypes. I mean, what other questions would you ask? Marge, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm
Cool.
listening.
I was just wondering if you might have any questions.
I don't offhand because I found it kind of interesting that you're already. I was going to ask that, but you're already talking about like the quality of the actual cannabis. Landrace cannabis is something that, Angus, you wouldn't actually smoke yourself because most of it's actually grown for. Yes, you're saying for hash.
Oh no, I would smoke it all myself. Oh no.
Oh, you would?
Yeah. I like landrace. I like landrace stuff, and like I'm saying, I mean, traditional hash.
Right.
You know, it's not like it's not accepting it unless people are making kind of oils out of it.
Right.
Where it can be knockout, sort of even back in the 70s was like 40% THC in some of the lab tests and stuff, you know. I mean, but that's making hash out of sativas, you know. No, I would smoke all this stuff, you know. I spent years fucking smoking. I'm just, when I was saying I'm not smoking, it's like at the minute, you know.
Right.
In lockdown, I was smoking. I was fucking going through like 2 ounces of hybrid stuff a week, like easily, you know. But I just go through phases where I want to just like really not, like, even though I'm boozing at the minute, I generally sort of just will do like these days prolonged breaks from smoking, you know, especially if I've got if I need to get, if I'm doing writing, you know, it really I don't find it helps me to get through, be productive when I'm working on writing stuff. So I tend to just stop, you know. It's like I'm more disciplined these days. Didn't used to be at all, you know. When I was collecting before, I'd be fucking just, I'd have walk around with just bags of hash on me, you know. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it happens to us all as we grow older. We become more responsible because we have more to lose.
Not me. I'm not being responsible. No, it's like purely hedonistic with me. Like I've realized, like, pleasure for me, I sort of, you know, I stopped smoking, so I enjoy it more when I go back to it, you know.
You're taking a really good tolerance break and then coming back to it. So
yeah,
absolutely.
And just one other thing I was going to say, like landrace hash, you know, it all has very, like, all the diversity of the products I've talked about. There's also the diversity of effects, you know. So ganja sativas, sinsemilla, sort of traditional sativas, like they grow down in the tropical places where cannabis doesn't grow wild and stuff, you know, much stronger. Typically effect is sort of can range from towards like very sort of speedy, rushy, quite intense, quite psychedelic, like Aussie people from the hippie sort of days would definitely would recognize that, you know, from very strong Thai and stuff. And then it can go, and with the Indian stuff, more towards a sort of like a somewhat less potent, quite mild stuff sometimes even. But then up in the Himalayas, in the Indian and Nepali Himalayas, it's the main product is hand rubbed charas, and that can have a very initially a very sort of up and euphoric and positive, uplifting feeling, very feel good vibe, and then quite quickly settles down into a more sort of even, long lasting, quite productive buzz, you know. And then Afghan hash is traditionally what it was actually prized for amongst smokers was they liked it to be a kind of luxurious, mellow sort of a buzz, you know. Often, like, it wasn't necessarily like, by which I mean, like, the Afghan hash that had the best reputation and was most prized by people was bulky hash, and most people they prized it because it was really, really resinous and sticky, really good flavors, but it was also not necessarily reputed as the most powerful, you know. Like, the most powerful was often said to come from like round Logar, round Kabul, more towards the eastern Hindu Kush, but it wasn't the most expensive, you know. So it wasn't like, which is just to say, like, people didn't necessarily prize potency as being the same thing as quality and what they were looking for, you know. Like, they didn't necessarily want to get like floored by stuff, you know. Like, it was more leaning towards like kind of a hedonistic, luxurious effect, you know. Like, they'd have the chilim khanas, like smoking houses, which you can still find in Afghanistan, where you'd go in and there'd be like a malang, like or someone like that, like a kind of a Muslim holy man, you know, with dreads and stuff, whose job was to just like caretake this chilim house often next to the shrine of some Sufi saint or something. Still have these places in Balk and things, and you could go in there and like as just someone passing through and sit down and pay a little money, and they'd make a chilim for you. Like, a chilim in Afghanistan means like a big floor standing, like a bong, like a big floor standing bong. It doesn't mean like an Indian chilim, you know, that you see people smoking that they hold in their hands. So that would be with like pure hash in the bowl. Forget where I was going with that, but anyway,
you got lost when you were thinking about smoking that good shit. That's what happened, you know.
Yeah, but what I was saying was that on the ceilings often they'd have like big paintings painted up on the ceilings, you know, some kind of like you know, paradise type scene, and you would just like lie down and sort of like, you know, space out on this thing that was meant to inspire your kind of your high, you know. Yeah. Having said that, you know, often like big hash smoking events at Sufi shrines in Pakistan and Afghanistan are pretty wild, you know. So big doll drums going, like kind of fucking Detroit techno, like kind of people spinning around and wailing about you know, the Sufi saints and stuff. Yeah.
Sweet, man. Well, we covered landrace and hybrid and pheno. We covered the main differences between indica and sativa, but there's a question here which, but it is not a question from the listener mail section just yet, but I'm wondering if somebody wants to start breeding their own cannabis and making their own strains and things, what would you suggest would be the best landrace strains people can use for breeding cannabis?
I mean, I often get this kind of question, and depending on my mood, I'm by email, you know, and I do try and be helpful, but I get a little frustrated with it after however many years it's been, like 15, 16 years. Like, best is such a subjective thing. I mean, yeah, obviously, like obviously there is good cannabis and bad cannabis, and best cannabis and worst cannabis, but a big factor in that is not just, of course, obviously there's objective quality, you know. So when I hear people saying, oh, you know, I got this landrace and it doesn't smell of anything, it's like, that's a shit landrace. You know, it's got no smell, you know. But anyway, they should be stinky as anything, you know, as any hybrid, if they're good, you know. But generally speaking, the best landraces are generally, most people would say, the North Afghan, you know, from around Mazar-i-Sharif and Balkh and such like, and Shebagan and towards Herat and stuff, further west. And that is, you know, the region that traditionally it was viewed as having the best hashish, the best charas, the best, you know, sieved cannabis resin, all would traditionally come from that area. And those plants, you know, are generally agreed to be, you know, they're the origin of basically what everyone's still smoking. You know, they're the kind of bedrock of it, in terms of they were what was used to provide big resin production, and mostly the early finish and the compact architecture, you know, the stuff that you could grow. They're what enabled cultivation in America to go north of 30 degrees up into, you know, Northern California and Oregon and so on, you know, and they're what enabled it to go indoors, you know, in and indicas, but really particularly North Afghan indicas, I think, were generally the seen as being the best thing to work with. But very quickly, these distinctions were lost, you know, as the industry became just very specific to America. And then in terms of the sativa side, you know, Thai, which means Lao, really, Landraces, you know, they're what made Thai stick, which, you know, in the heyday of Thai stick in the late 60s, early 70s, you know, it would sell for several times its weight in gold in America, as would the best Afghan charas, you know, when it was good stuff. And they're what's used for, some people claim that like skunk number 1 is by origin a Thai Afghan cross, but it's heavily contested. Some people say that it was Oaxacan and Colombian genetics that went into it, but very early on, Thai genetics were introduced to Colombia as well. So by the, you know, hippies and stuff. So it's almost a meaningless discussion in some ways. They were like good. Some people say Lebanese is very good for breeding with. I would say any good landrace is good for breeding with, you know. Things we've got like Syrian and Sinai. Of course, you know, you need to find out how the crosses work out. Maybe they won't work well, but generally, yeah, those would be the obvious choices. Less good choices, I would think, would be things like Himalayan landraces, which we haven't really talked about, which are multi-purpose plants mostly. So they're cultivated for fiber, seed, and hand rub charas, and they're very much in what's called a crop weed complex or a crop weed wild complex, where you've got this continual interchange of pollen between the wild and cultivated populations. And Himalayan cannabis has, you know, it's a slightly, like, if you were going to be a salesman about it or pretentious about it, Himalayan charas has a slightly rustic edge to it. You know, it's not as refined. You know, it's got some, has a tendency to have some slightly coarse aromas in there. It can be a little harsh on the throat and stuff. And you know, it would be trickier to breed something really refined out of it. I would have thought, not that I've ever tried, but I know the product itself very well. And even like do you remember like last time we were talking, you saw that picture of some really like high-end Nepali hash?
Yeah.
Yeah. So even that, you know, had just like, I don't want to overstate it, was fucking lovely stuff, but it just had a slight edge of like a little harshness on the throat, you know.
Right.
Like, I mean, in the sense of like more than just any, like, you know, more than, it's a specific quality, you know, of the Himalayan stuff, you know. It's just got a little, I don't know what the word is, like astringency to it, you know. Like weedy, a quality that's that I in my mind always associates coming through from the weedier stuff that grows around it, that you always have some pollen from in any field in the Himalayas.
Right.
The reason I think they do it is, like, many people used to try and encourage them to cut down the weedy populations around the villages, you know, and they tried to do the same even in you know, with some Afghans and stuff, you know, because even not so much there, but still you would find like around in the mountains, it would tend, you know, it's just because it's naturally growing around there. But they never, like, people never wanted to, farmers, you know, like they would never want to grow it as a seedless crop there because they needed the seeds for the food. And they, you know, and the Himalayan farmers, you'd never persuade them to go around cutting down, because it's just a fucking hassle anyway. But also, as far as I know, like, I would suspect they kind of know themselves that those weedy plants are like really conveying hardiness to the cultivated plants. Because in the Himalayas, you're right up on these extremes, you know, of where the plant grows. So it's like you're very high up, got super intensive rainfall. You have these swings of temperature between the night and day, you know. So these plants have to be tough, you know. And if you cut down weedy relatives, long time you're going to end up with a much less hardy crop in all likelihood. It's very common with like many traditional crops that like the farmers allow the wild relatives to grow around the fields. Not just cannabis. I mean, and I think there's like pragmatic reasons for that. It's like you're keeping the plants tough.
Yeah.
So do you find that affects the plant as a home grower or as a consumer when you're taking it from those altitudes and you're getting, obviously when it's grown at those altitudes and in those conditions, you're getting a certain expression, and then you're bringing it back down the hills and then growing it in indoors in a tent, say at a lower altitude? Are you finding that that's obviously moving away from the original expression that they brought it down for?
Oh yeah, there's no question that being at altitude itself is universally understood by the farmers and the consumers as the altitude is really important to the quality as like characteristics of the product. So I've bought like charas with me when I've been going around collecting, and sat with sadhus and stuff, the yogis with all the dreads and stuff who you see on a lot of these routes, because a lot of the routes are kind of pilgrimage routes, and sat down with them and smoked it. And if it's been some really good stuff, they'll say, oh, this is like some really high altitude charas, and meaning it's some really good stuff, and yeah, it encourages resin production from the plants being up at altitude. They pump out way more resin, and I think also like a different aroma profile. Same as with something like tea, So really good tea comes from like really high altitude places in Taiwan and China and stuff, like Fujian or whatever. The plant at those altitudes, it grows slower because it's cold, and it also seems to just produce more resin generally, And so yeah, when you bring it down into tents and stuff and lower altitudes, I'm sure it does change it, but I can't pretend myself to have done like a really extensive investigation of this. But yeah, for sure, like many times I've grown things I've collected, and mates of mine have grown bits, and yeah, I remember really early on when I was first collecting for the site, growing some Kamani, like Nepalese type landrace stuff indoors. And yeah, it was a different thing, but the thing was we grew it as sensi, and I never tried smoking no one grows it as sensi in those places, so I couldn't do like a direct comparison. You know what I mean? I know it's the charas from being there. Yeah.
Just interesting. I mean, I've noticed it. I've noticed different strains and different temperatures, because we get such wild swings from being cold in winter and hot in summer. Even just the difference in heat can bring out different expressions between a strain. So that's why I was just curious if you'd noticed it, being that you deal in a lot more landrace varieties than what I would. So yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, it's really the environmental conditions, make a huge difference to the how the plant expresses itself. So North Afghan charas farmers often will leave the plants really, really late into the beginning of the cold season. And I was talking recently to some American growers who'd grown these Mazaris. I think it was the same Mazari. Anyway, I think it was one of these same Afghan landraces, and they were working at quite high altitude in like the Sierra Nevada or somewhere, and left them really late. And they said in the last sort of week or two, as the temperatures really went plunging down at night, you saw a sudden like kind of burst of resin production late in the grow, and that's exactly what the Afghan farmers have always like every time I've discussed it, and reports I've had from Lucas and and Afghans who are involved in the landrace thing themselves now, like all say this is the case, And when I first went collecting and was told about this, I was really confused by it because it turns out that the main strain in Balkan Mazari Sharif is quite a long flowering strain. So it's sort of like a 5 to 6 month plant, and it's not an indica. It's a sort of indica sativa hybrid that's known to farmers there as Balki or Mazari, and it's the sort of it's become since then the most popular plant amongst farmers in Afghanistan. As for political reasons, the crop's been sort of forced out of certain areas. It's been adopted. The Mazari strain's been adopted in the south and stuff. Anyway, suffice to say, like I was sitting with the guy who had this hash and was getting some seeds for me, and I was saying, like, so can you describe this Mazari Sharif plant to me? And he's like, oh, it's really, really big, like really tall. And I thought he's just telling me that because he thinks that's what I want to know, that it's like a really big plant, because a really big plant must be a really good plant,
Yeah.
And I thought he's just fucking bullshitting me. And I think so. What I asked him, like, what do the leaves look like? And stuff, because we're in Peshawar, like not even in Afghanistan. He's an Afghan from the north who's smuggling hash into Pakistan, and he's got what's clearly real top end, like Balki and Mazari Garda, like unpressed resin, like red colored, really, really fucking sticky resin and stuff. So I have to get seeds from this guy, And he's going something like, when do they harvest it? And he's like, oh, December. And I'm like, what? And I say, this guy is like, I just can't tell it, because he seems like he really does know his shit and he's got the stuff, I'm getting more and more confused by this. Anyway, this is like 2006, 2007. And it turns out, this is like as we grew the seeds out, and then as more information started to come out of Afghanistan, they did some like cannabis surveys there, like UN plus Afghan government surveys, and it's like, this is this really big, fucking big, like indica sativa hybrid strain is how you describe it. And push it into December, and as it gets like really fucking cold, as you can imagine, in winter in Afghanistan, like they'll cut it in the first week or two of December and plant it in May, June, so the fucking plants are huge, and pumping out resin in those last couple of weeks as the temperatures plummet and the air is really dry.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, man.
Well,
There's loads of sorry, Bubble.
I was gonna say I could probe that line of questioning for hours. So I won't ask any more questions.
This is why we have to get Angus back, man. This is why we have to get him back for a Q&A, and then everybody's gonna be here asking questions to him, and we can sit here for ages. If you don't mind, Angus.
No, I'm happy to blabber on for fucking ages. I'm just worried I'm talking too much, to be honest. But,
No, don't worry, man. Don't worry. Yeah, we are going a bit longer than our usual shows, but I'm sure everybody is appreciating the content. But we have covered the whole landrace and phenotype and hybrid thing, and now we should go into the listener mail section, because we have an interesting question here that sort of relates to this as well, from Lusant. He said, not sure if it's been asked, but if a Hermes produces a seed, is it true that those produced seeds will always be Hermes themselves? Like, for example, instead of 100% feminized, it's a 100% chance you'll get Hermes again. A rumor I've heard around. I'd like to know from your experience if it's true or not. If this has already been asked, I apologize in advance again. So, what do you think about that Hermes and Hermes being passed down from strain to strain? How does that work? Do you know much about that?
So, as far as I know, the primary reason that this trait exists in cultivated strains of cannabis is as a sort of side effect of growing it as a sinsemilla crop. So, if you remember, I was saying, like, in the major traditional centers of ganja cultivation, ganja means sinsemilla really in its most strict technical meaning. So in the old, there's as I talked about before, there's an Indian alchemical text called the Anandakanda, which is where the sinsemilla technique is first described in literature as a technique for producing a seedless high THC product, sinsemilla, and that probably goes back to the 15th century or so. maybe even back to the 12th or 13th century. So it's a very old technique that doubtless predates even the text itself. And so point being, you've got 900 perhaps years, at least possibly 1,000 years, maybe even considerably longer, because it's described in a Chinese text on cannabis called the Qi Min Yao Shu, that you also, if you cut down the males, that you get a seedless female crop, and that goes to maybe the 8th or 9th century. So it's been around for a long time, since people have been cultivating cannabis. This technique has been known, but it's described in India. Unlike in China, it's described in India specifically for producing a high THC crop, which is called ganja. So anyway, you've had this technique known for a long time. And if you imagine you cut down you've got a field of cannabis and you cut down all your males, but a rogue male flower pitches up on one of the females and you don't realize, and you've got some customers and they think, oh fucking hell, this is a really good batch of ganja. I'm going to grow this seed out. You've got an unintentional selective pressure for Hermes, and so that's going back for 1,000 years or so. Maybe you have this unintentional selective pressure for Hermes because of growing a seedless field, trying to grow a seedless field. The likelihood that a seed in a batch of ganja has come from a Hermes is fairly high. And one reason I think why it's such a problem in American, not such a problem, but how it got into American cannabis is because the early growers in the States were picking seeds out of imported batches of ganja. Nobody introduced Afghan seeds to America until the late 70s, which is when you get the beginnings of a really big economic substitution, import substitution. Sorry. You have a native, homegrown cannabis industry in the States is when the Afghan seeds arrived, but they didn't arrive until the late 70s because someone had to consciously bring seeds over from Afghanistan, whereas seeds were pitching up in Sinsemilla for a long time, and so people were working with seeds that there's quite a high chance were from Hermes, whereas if you get seeds from Lao growers themselves, like directly from the farmers, they won't work knowingly with seed that is from when customers of mine and stuff, I've had people grow big indoor fields of Lao landraces in pots under lights, in conditions, in other words, that landraces are not well acclimatized to, and they've reported no Hermes at all, like 100, 200 plants indoors, which is not at all what you'd associate with Thai or Lao landraces, but these are seeds.
What do you think causes the Hermes to happen?
So it's because people are selecting for that. Oh, it's a stress response.
Yeah.
Primarily, but it's also, if you stress the plants, if you overfeed them, overwater them, generally fuck around with the light hours, and people often don't know, for example, that with a tropical landrace, you don't want to start that on 18 hours light. They maximum you want to put like 14 hours light, but really, you could just run them from 12 and then go down to 11 hours light into flowering. If you're trying to, maybe some people think it hurries them along a bit,
right?
But they're from a 12, they're from 12-ish, around there. I don't know if it goes to more than like 12 and a half hours ish and 13 hours ish in most of Laos. And it's a stress response, the Hermes thing, and but also it's a survival response, like because they're just trying to propagate, they're trying to keep themselves going by making some seeds. I would guess.
So that trait's obviously going to carry on if you're growing that seed out. That's going to continue on in that genetic profile.
Yeah,
it'll always be dormant in there, and it's just if you're adding those stresses it'll obviously show from there.
I think I'd imagine it is possible to breed out, but what I understand from from reading guys like David Watson and stuff, he in his opinion it would be really, really difficult to like permanently breed the Hermy trait out. But like I say, they were working mostly, their sativa genetics mostly came from seeds picked out of imported centimilla, so it's very likely that those seeds had come from Hermy pollen in the first place,
Right.
So yeah, I would assume that it's let's say even in reading the accounts of the ganja industry in Bengal, the consensus was also there that it was not uncommon for a farmer to have the podar, the ganja doctor, come around like 2 or 3 times during the course of flowering to weed out any Hermes they spotted in the field, and for them to late on in flowering for like a Hermy to show up just at the last minute, late on in the harvest, they described that happening, to farmers. It was like a known thing, But like I say, equally in smoking in Laos, I lived there for many years, and I don't remember seeing a batch of ganja there ever that had, if it had seeds, had anything other than seeds that were clearly from very early on in the female's flowering phase, like they were right in the centers of the buds, right up against the main stem, big fat seeds, that had clearly come from early pollination. And I don't remember ever seeing, maybe saw once, like buds, where there was a small seed on the outer flowers, that was like, I'd have thought quite lightly a Hermy seed, because they tend to, they'll cut down the males like very early on. I saw and have seen, not just in Laos but in India, large amounts of bud that was not a fucking seed in sight, But most often, what you will get is at the bare minimum, you'll get, in a key, you'll get in a kilo, you'll get, a decent, not enough that like there was a point when I was first there, where the seeds I was bringing back from Laos were just like from my own smoking stash, but I couldn't put together like a commercially viable quantity of seeds, even with the vast amounts of stuff I was smoking out of just picking it out of stuff I bought, all the seeds that we have now are from, from the farmers themselves, what they use to grow their own fields, But my point was just that, like, it's what some people would call semi-sensy, so they have seeds in the ganja there that what the Indians would call elephant seeds, so from the very early pollination.
Nice,
and they need those to be able to grow a field the next year, It was said that somewhere I heard or read, sorry, that there were points when the Thai stick economy got really sophisticated, and there was a huge amount of money involved, where the brokers would get a farmer to specifically just be responsible for producing seed, because they didn't want to, they wanted to just have their main farmers growing just a pure Sensi fields, and I think that may also have been the case in Bengal in India when it was a big commercial industry there as well, But generally speaking, the farmer makes their own seeds. Next year. Yeah.
It makes sense, man. It's getting late, so we should get one more question wrapped up here, because there's another interesting question here from Billy, and then we'll let you go on your way, man, because it's hitting midnight here in the UK now.
Yeah, I'm falling over my words a bit as well. Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah,
it's all good, man. It's all good. Don't worry. Yeah, so here from Billy Barnes, we have as we have an endocannabinoid system, does this mean we co-evolved with the cannabis plant? What do you think about that?
So not my area of expertise, but no, I think the answer to that is not that. So I guess people are quite interested to know when the evidence is for humans cultivating cannabis, and you know, when it starts, and in terms of it being like a crop grown in the way that we were growing wheat and so on. It's not as, the evidence is not as far back as you might expect, and the way they know is because domesticated pollen grains versus like wild pollen grains of cannabis, the domesticated pollen grains are significantly bigger, and evidence for domesticated pollen grains or of cannabis found in a context that suggests it's being cultivated isn't much older than like 3,500 BCE, which is, you know, a lot later than things like wheat and stuff. And it's it probably goes back further than that, you know, like some experts think it's probably sort of like 6,000 BCE-ish, somewhere in kind of Western China, that it's likely to have been originally domesticated, maybe by like millet cultivating communities. But if you go west again from there to Xinjiang, so kind of well into sort of Indica territory, like the big hashish producing region of the Central Asian desert bits of China. So there's evidence there, sort of 3,500 BCE-ish. And then there's of these domesticated pollen grains. And then if you go over to Ukraine, southern Russia, similar sort of like that same point in time, there's also evidence there for early cultivation. And then round in sort of Bulgaria, Romania, also all around the kind of Black Sea. But point being, people were, of course, getting high on cannabis before that. And there's evidence of like, you know, hunter-gatherer groups may have been cultivating cannabis, you know, possibly. But we're talking, you know, the evidence for humans and cannabis being, you know, found together, it's sort of 8,000 BC-ish in Japan is the earliest I know of. Like there's seeds found around the Jomon community. So people would have, you know, we migrated out of Africa, I don't know what, like 100,000 years ago, right? So we'd already evolved by like well before that, like what, 200,000 years ago, I guess. I don't quote me on that, but anyway, the point is, to encounter cannabis, we had to leave Africa, we humans, and because its range is native to Eurasia. You know, it's originally from Asia. It's right. Evolved probably in Tibet. So we had our endocannabinoid systems a long time into that story. You know, and the reason we and cannabis. And the reason it's found in other species, you know, kind of funny algae and whatever, is because we're evolved from the same thing. You know, we all living life. All life shares the same origins. I think is why we have these same things. You know, so why they're producing these what are effectively, you know, substances, and why cannabinoids occur in other life forms. I think. But I'm not a scientist, so that's probably a slightly off explanation, you know. But there's John McPartland who's written about it. You can find it there, and in various other there's studies which I think. But I remember John McPartland has an explanation for why we and cannabis and various other things have cannabinoids and an endocannabinoid system, you know. But yeah, our story with cannabis is not as old as people might imagine, you know. We had to leave Africa to encounter it. Yeah.
That's a good answer. So I think that's everything for this week, because you know, it's just past midnight now. And it's definitely it's been a fucking great episode, man, with loads of great info. And of course, we had the interview this week as well with you, so there's loads of more good info in there as well.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, normally I do these on like a, you know, caffeine kick, or like a, you know, I've done a few stoned, but if you think I sort of you know, waffle and ramble like now, you should hear me when I've had a few spliffs. You guys are way more coherent than I would be. Yeah.
No, we practice every week. Yeah.
Yeah. Olympic.
Yeah, man. So it's been a pleasure, mate, and thanks again for coming here to chat to us and share your expertise with us, man. It's been awesome.
No,
We
no,
wanna-
it's a real pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on. It's a real privilege to just be able to talk ad fucking nauseam like this at length. It's
Yeah,
it's a
man.
real pleasure and a privilege. So thanks. Yeah.
No, thanks for being here, man. And I'm sure our listeners have enjoyed it massively as well. So,
Cool. Shall I just sign myself out? How
yeah,
does it
sure,
work?
man. You go on your way, and we'll let you. We'll wrap
Wrap
this
up.
up and say goodbye to
Yeah.
everybody. But thanks
Nice
again,
one.
man.
Well,
We'll get you. We'll get you back on for that Q&A soon, if you don't mind, sir. If you don't
yeah,
mind, of
bring it
course.
on. Yeah. Well,
Sweet.
cheers everyone then.
Yeah,
Adios.
have a good day,
Nice.
man.
Cheers. Thanks,
Goodbye.
Angus.
Thanks, Austin.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
man.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
Yes. Good show. Good show, everybody. Good show. And thanks to Chilbert for hooking us up with Angus there. He's been on the show a few times already. We've only just found out about him. But the guy knows his stuff, man. He's well researched in all of this cannabis thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna have to
Yeah,
listen back
why-
3
so
times
much.
for all the info. Yeah, I'm gonna make this private, so you all have to go and download it. All right, go download these episodes, everybody. This is going to be a good one when it goes out. And it's going to be Angus on all 3 episodes this week for the cannabis news, for the interview, and for the grow guides. Let's go to the outro anyway. Let's do that. Nice. Yeah, so we'll make this quick and we'll just wrap it up, I suppose. Because we've run over time. But it's been a good one. It's been a good one.
Yeah, been
oh
epic.
My gosh, really? The missus just opened the... Look, we're in the outro now, so it'll be a little less professional, okay, everybody? But you might have heard the door open there. So a door opens and a Budweiser and Anheuser-Busch. Yeah, just another flag there. She... The missus hands me a can of Budweiser. I'll reach out for it, and then she shakes it. Fucking shakes it.
Turn it. Put it on the table and turn it 3 full turns, and then
Right,
open
family
it.
is-
It won't.
Put it on
spray.
the table and turn it 3 full turns. What do you mean?
So put it
I'm
on. Put it
seeing
on a
that.
flat.
I
On a
don't know
flat
about
table.
that. If
Put
is
it on
that
the
real
top,
now? Wait a
then
minute.
on the bottom, then
No,
on the
just-
top,
just-
like
just
that.
on- yeah. No, no, no,
Just set
no.
it straight down. Just set it
Like,
straight
You
down.
mean rotate
and
it
Yes.
Twist it. Yeah.
clockwise
Doesn't
or
matter.
anti-clockwise? I'm gonna
Doesn't
try
matter.
both just in case, or just doing anti-clockwise after clockwise make it worse. Right? If this don't work, Bubble, it's all your fault, right? How many times do I turn it?
3 full times.
3 full times, right? She's come back in the room now to see if this is gonna work. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, it's all over the place. It's not really, mate. It's
You're welcome.
it kind of worked. Nice one. Nice one.
Kind of worked. Yeah.
Kind of worked. It was fizzier, but not as fizzy as expected after that vigorous shake she gave that.
Yeah.
At least she showed you that she shaked it. If you didn't do that, I mean, that would have been really,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would have been a wicked.
Okay, now like the boy did the other day. Hey, I'm busy, you know. Like, can you do me a favor? Just grab me a beer out of the fridge there, boy. And he's like, yeah, no problem. And he runs, comes upstairs, and he shakes it like fucking vigorously. Shakes that fucking like, god damn. You watch now, boy. When you ask for a Pepsi, god damn.
You'll be putting it in the paint shaker at the local shop and bring
Oh
it
yeah,
home for
remember
him. Here you go.
that
Here's a
Simpsons
Pepsi.
episode?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the house explodes and shit.
Yeah.
Funny. Yeah, but been a good show. Been a good show, man. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it. It's been a good one, man. What are we talking about next week is maximizing terpene production next week, everybody. So trying to get the best flavor out of
Sweet.
cannabis. So that's going to be a fun one too. And of course, on Thursday we have an interview with Matt Lammers as well, who is a cannabis journalist. So if you're a patron, don't forget to join us live for that. But I think that's
every
it.
time you
Sorry.
every time you say that, I just think Matt Lauer for some reason. I don't know why.
Who's that?
Matt Lauer is like the American TV host, isn't he?
Yeah, we do have one.
Yeah. No,
Right.
just there's a movie. Oh fuck, what's his name? Shake and Bake.
Oh,
Will
Ricky
Will
Bobby.
Will Ferrell. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
does
yeah.
one. He does one where he's like a scientist and he works out time travel or something like that. and yeah, he's just like, Matt Lauer can suck it when he writes a book. It's just it. Yeah, sorry, just a weird stoner thing. Every time we say that.
Sweet. Well, the music's starting, so we'll wrap this up and we'll say goodbye to everybody.
Keep moving.
Yeah, we just it's the hour-long tunes, so it's got all of the tunes which you had there from back in the day. I thought I'd let it all run for you all, man. There's some good tunes about to come up for an hour, so don't forget to hit that like button if you haven't done that already. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that already. That would be appreciated too. But of course, don't forget to get out there and download episodes of High and Homegrown, man. We hit 500,000 now. We are 500,000 so we're getting there. Just another 500,000 to go. So share and bring friends and all that kind of stuff. And thanks again to Angus for joining us. We appreciate it, man. And we'll catch you all on the next one, which is Thursday for your Patreon, or Sunday to learn about terpenes.
Yes,
on the next show.
we will be here.
So,
Very good.
Yes, have fun. And thanks for joining us, everybody. Stay high and stay safe and all that shit. We'll see you on the next one.
Oh.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
2 weeks. Just one more. Bye.